Hello, everyone. Welcome. I am here with Gennady Stolyarov, and we're here with Brent Nally, and we're here with Bobby Ridge, and I think Max Anderson. Is Max here?
Yes.
Yes. All right. So we're going to be talking about the COVID-19, the coronavirus, and giving some interesting insight. Our guest today is Gennady Stolyarov. So, how you doing, Gennady? What do you got to tell us about
Well,
COVID-19?
this has been an intense time for everyone, myself included. I have been coordinating the U.S. Transhumanist Party's emergency response to this unfolding pandemic. It's a very unfortunate situation that has engulfed the world, and nobody is completely secure from it. But it has also exposed a lot of vulnerabilities in our healthcare system, in our political system, in the fact that I consider the responses currently being pursued by many governments in the Western world to be completely wrong-headed, completely the opposite of what needs to be done. What needs to be done is
all of the countries, or just some of them?
The countries that are aggressively shutting down their economies, forcing businesses to close, limiting personal freedoms, I believe the opposite strategy needs to be pursued, a full-fledged mobilization of the economy and society to combat this disease. And the way to do this is to massively prioritize public health and longevity, to make that the new goal of the entire society and the economy, as if we were fighting a war, because that is what we should be doing. We should be fighting a war against death and disease. And one important point that I will make that underlies many of these proposals is that the number one risk factor for COVID-19 is aging. Anyone who has seen the mortality rates for this disease knows that it vastly and disproportionately affects the biologically old. But what most people in our society do not yet realize is that one does not have to be biologically old just because one is chronologically old, if one can avail oneself of the future technologies that can reverse biological senescence, which is aging, which is the damage that occurs to us on a cellular and molecular level as we get older. So ultimately, I have said COVID-19 is our enemy, but it is not our main enemy. It is just the lieutenant of our main enemy. Our main enemy is the Grim Reaper. And you can see here in my book, Death is Wrong, on the cover, the Grim Reaper is cowering because this child is banishing the Grim Reaper. And we need to banish the Grim Reaper. We need to ultimately win this war against aging and death. And in the process, of course, defeat COVID-19 and massively improve our preparations for dealing with future pandemics. So to this end, the U.S. Transhumanist Party has established an emergency 7-day exposure period. Typically, our exposure periods for proposed platform planks are longer. We can go anywhere from 15 days to 30 days. But in this case, because of how rapidly this pandemic is spreading, we have decided we need to shorten our time frames and put the most urgent and salient measures before our members for some quick deliberation. We will follow that up with a 3-day voting period starting on Wednesday, March 25th, 2020. As always, with our votes, they will be entirely electronic. Members can propose options for each platform planks, different wordings, different concepts, and then voting will be done using the ranked preference approach. So people will be able to rank order the wording options, including none of the above, in order of their preference. And then if their number one choice gets eliminated by virtue of getting the lowest number of votes, then there's an instant runoff process. And during the next round of the instant runoffs, their number two option gets reassigned to the number one slot. So people only ever need to vote once. And it's fair and it's representative of their actual preferences. So they don't need to ever vote for the so-called lesser evil. We found this approach works great in arriving at sensible choices that are palatable to the vast majority of our members. And we encourage other people to join the U.S. Transhumanist Party, because if you join by Wednesday, March 25th, you will be able to take part in this vote. And as you can see on our website here, if you go to the bar at the top, there's a link for free membership. If you click that, you can sign up absolutely for free in less than a minute and take part in our deliberations. Vote, spread these ideas, because we need the public, we need the media, we need the politicians to be aware that there is a different approach here than cowering in fear, locking down, shutting down the economy, and just essentially waiting for this thing to maybe affect you, maybe not, but it seems an exercise in futility. I say we need to really mobilize for war.
Yeah, I feel like the media did really well with getting the information out about COVID-19, the spread, and like what it's affecting, how it's affecting everyone. And I think they're even, for the first like 3 days when after the pandemic was declared by the World Health Organization, the next like 3 to 5 days, I feel like, listening to a doctor's opinion was like just like the wrong thing to do within those 5 days, which are very important 5 days. And because, doctors aren't keeping up with the news, they're not keeping up with like, daily, like what's happening in Italy and, Japan and China and et cetera. They might be looking at a little bit more after the COVID, but it spread so fast over the next 5 days that there's just huge things happening by the hour, really. So you can't expect the doctors to keep up with that with their busy schedule. So like I talked to a lot of doctors and a lot of scientists within that time period, and like half of them were like, COVID's not that big of a deal, and the other half were like, yeah, dude, like embrace for like the worst. So I thought the media did really well. Like there's some hype here and there, but I mean, man, like a pandemic can get out of control like really fast. And so it's really great to hear, to have you here, Gennady, since you're the chairman of the United States Transhumanist Party. So we can discuss, the politics of this, because really the politics is what's going to ultimately determine how, the science will ultimately determine, but the politics will be a huge, benefactor and like determinant of how truly bad this is going to be, because we could like fall apart overnight, just like Italy and like many other countries, just because we're not just giving people tests and we're not focusing on the research and etc. Quarantine properly and whatever. So yeah, can you keep discussing about the politics of COVID-19?
Certainly, and of course the Transhumanist Party, as you can see, has as its slogan putting science, health, and technology forefront of American politics. So we believe that policy does need to be informed by science. So in light of this, we need to make sure.
That's on the values page, right? Rowan, isn't that on the values page on the USTP's website?
I can check.
Oh, it's right there. Putting science and health and technology.
Yeah, putting science, health, and technology at the forefront of American politics. But now that you're on the values page, take a look at Ideal 1 of our core ideals. The Transhumanist Party supports significant life extension achieved through the progress of science and technology. The Transhumanist Party supports a cultural, societal, and political atmosphere informed and animated by reason, science, and secular values. And Ideal 3, the Transhumanist Party supports efforts to use science, technology, and rational discourse to reduce and eliminate various existential risks to the human species. I think we can see how all three of these core ideals are highly relevant to dealing with this pandemic. These are the principles that need to animate American politics. These are the principles that are essentially our watchwords for this war. This is what we need to adopt as our mindset. So how do we do this in practice? The biggest problem right now is that the American healthcare system, like the healthcare system in Italy, like the healthcare system in Spain and in France, and all the other countries that are dealing with this epidemic and experiencing relatively high mortality, is overwhelmed and is completely lacking in capacity. Now, there's a defeatist strategy for dealing with this called flattening the curve. The idea is to delay and actually prolong the spread of the pandemic so that at any given time, there are only as many patients as there is available space in hospitals and other clinics that can handle the influx. However, this, of course, raises the question, why in the world is there such limited space in the American healthcare system and in the healthcare systems of all of the other countries? Unfortunately, we have been suffering from decades of protectionism and decades of NIMBYism and other special interest advocacy that has intentionally limited the construction of medical facilities and construction more generally. There are many special interest lobbies that try to limit development, and this is completely unacceptable. Now, in China, during the outbreak in Wuhan, the Chinese government did some very helpful responses, and one of those was to rapidly construct several temporary hospitals within a period of less than 10 days. And my only disagreement with that strategy was that they made the hospitals temporary. The alternative that the U.S. Transhumanist Party proposes in the first section of our 17-point plan right now, section E8A, is to rapidly construct these hospitals, but to make them permanent. So use the same techniques that the Chinese used, and then construct one new hospital for every 50,000 in population, and require these hospitals to remain open indefinitely, even once the pandemic has subsided. Require these hospitals to remain fully staffed, irrespective of patient influx, irrespective of profitability, and of supply any shortfalls in the funds for those hospitals. So if they don't get enough revenue from patients, yes, the federal government will pay them the difference. However, in exchange for that, these hospitals have to charge reasonable prices for their services. So no more hyperinflated charge master lists where a given service might cost several hundred times to the patient what it actually costs to the hospital. Instead, there would be a limitation that the patient may only be charged 110% of the cost to the hospital. So this solution would massively expand the capacity of the healthcare system. It would also solve the problem of outrageous prices for healthcare in the United States that are completely unrelated to cost. And it would solve the problem of the undersupply of healthcare, because these hospitals would be required to be fully staffed at all times. Now, this is a massive reprioritization of the economy, but it is much better than shutting everything down. Right now, governments in many states are essentially shutting down businesses by force. They are stopping economic activity. This is a ramp up of economic activity. This is saying healthcare capacity should be expanded to such an extent that there will not be scarcity again. And any patient, after this pandemic subsides, who desires healthcare is going to be able to walk into those hospitals, and there will be abundant beds, there will be abundant medical practitioners. And when they're not busy treating patients, they're going to be engaging in research. So these will be research hospitals as well. And of course, part of what they will be working on will be anti-aging research, but they'll be also working on research to help prevent pandemics as well. So the next.
Well, why do you feel confident that there will be abundance? Can you discuss that? Why you think why you think this will lead to an abundance of health for health from health providers and economically?
Right. Because there will no longer be a constraint based on either these local laws that restrict new construction or certificate of need laws, which all need to be repealed. And furthermore, these hospitals will be required to be fully staffed and fully operational no matter how many patients they get. So this is, I think, a measure designed to, yes, artificially boost the supply of healthcare to such a vast extent that in normal times, the supply will be far greater than the demand. In times of pandemics, the supply will hopefully always meet the demand. But during the downtime, so to speak, the hospitals aren't going to close. They're not going to be dismantled. We should always be in this state of readiness for a pandemic. So I want to emphasize, I believe this is a long-term war.
Can I pause real quick?
Stop
Everyone.
sharing the screen.
So can Max, can you start recording?
How do I do that?
So
on
Brent was recording before, but he lagged out. So the recording went off. But Rowan, were you recording the screen? Oh yeah, we're live streaming.
We are live streaming. I'm recording the screen. And
just make sure we have the extra copy of recording. So Max is recording now. What were you saying, Gennady?
Yes. So this is a long-term war. I think the pandemic is a catalyst for this war, but this is just the first phase of the war. And after the pandemic subsides, we need to be fully mobilized for several reasons. First of all, as epidemiologists are saying, even if the rates of new COVID-19 infections decline, even if there are, say, 5 people in the world remaining with COVID-19, that doesn't mean that this disease will not come back. As long as there are any cases of COVID-19, any containment measures will only reset the clock. And
yeah, I mean, for all we know, this could be a yearly disease, just like influenza and H5N1. And so, and we're already seeing people getting re-diagnosed, people who re-diagnosed and reinfected, which is pretty incredible and scary. So, and yeah, I like how you hit on how we need to really focus on aging, how focusing on aging, defeating aging and reversing it and preventing it is an excellent way to. I think Brent had a lot of thoughts on that. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Bobby. So just real briefly, first of all, everybody can hear me, right?
Yes.
yes.
Yep. So just real briefly, I think that this is our time. When I say our, I mean the life extension community globally. This is it. This is our chance to communicate to the world all the things that we know and how it's so frustrating that for so many years, the leaders on this planet have been dumping massive amounts of resources into the wrong things. And this is it. And we're not doing a great job at it yet. And we still have time because it looks like this pandemic is going to continue to go on for a while. But I agree with all the things that Gennady said. But when I'm reading all these articles and when I'm on mainstream media listening or social media now, because that's more powerful, alternative media, whatever you want to call it, overwhelmingly, people are not leading with the fact that COVID-19, this pandemic, is primarily killing, overwhelmingly, 99%, this is killing people who have very short life expectancies. So what that means is these people are already very close to death anyways. They have compromised immune systems. As Gennady mentioned before, they are chronologically much older in most of the cases. And if they're not chronologically older, then they are also, or not chronologically, but then they are biologically old. So even if they might only be 40 years of age, and most of their body might be, around 40 or 45 years, biologically, their lungs are in a state of 70 years biologically. So they're a 70-year-old in their lungs, and that's where this disease is affecting them. So it's no surprise that those people die quickly. So this is really all that matters when it comes to this. And this is not being communicated effectively at all. People are freaking out, losing their minds. Even really intelligent, competent epidemiologists are not leading with this very important detail. So I'll stop in just a moment, but the thing that I want to leave the audience with is that the details matter, and your competency and your ability to look at all the details and figure out which ones are most important and least important is crucial here. And globally, the leadership on this planet has done an absolutely horrible job at this. And it's no surprise, because the leadership on this planet don't understand that aging is the main problem that we have. Aging is killing about 110,000 people conservatively out of about 150,000 people that die every day. That's more than 2/3 of the world's planet is being killed by biological aging and the diseases that aging creates. And so it's like I'm a broken record, and really all of us, but this is the fact that we have to focus on and get out to all of our leadership in government, in healthcare, in everything, everywhere. So that's my thoughts.
And it's not just it's not just the coronavirus that's attacking the elderly. Think of any disease, cancer, Parkinson's, any disease that kills us. Where does it usually attack? It's usually the elderly people. So I think that needs to be the focus, and that's the sad truth, is everybody is focusing on just the what's the cure to cancer, what can we do to cancer, what can we combat Parkinson's disease, all these different things. I think if we can focus on the cure to aging and get that fixed, everything else would just fall into place from that point on. And that's what we're seeing right now with the coronavirus. And if we can fix that with aging, think about it. Well, what are we seeing right now with the young people in the coronavirus? They're essentially unaffected, right? So I think if we can focus on that point and we can really get that to the masses and understand how important it is to target aging, it gets everything else in place.
Yes. So along
a researcher in Spain right now. What were we saying, Gennady?
Hey, yes, actually, guys, Gennady, Bobby, real quick, before we'll talk the whole conversation about this, we should give Gennady a proper introduction and let him explain a little bit more about USTP and the creation of USTP and who you really are. So Gennady, can you maybe just touch upon that real quick, and then we'll go back to the pandemic that's going on currently.
So I am the chairman of the United States Transhumanist Party. We are a political party in the United States, which was formed on October 7th, 2014. Our original founder was Zoltan Istvan. He was our presidential candidate in 2016, but in November of that year, he decided to step down from his role as chairman once his presidential campaign concluded, and he asked me to be the next chairman of the U.S. Transhumanist Party, which is a post that I have held for the past 3.5 years. And right now, we have a new presidential candidate for the 2020 general election, Mr. Ben Zion. And Ben Zion has been participating in presidential debates. He partook in an open debate in Chicago on March 4th, which involved 18 different candidates from various political parties. And then a week later, on March 15th, I moderated a debate with Ben Zion and several libertarian candidates, as well as 2 lesser-known Democratic Party candidates. And Ben Zion has been campaigning on a platform called the Futurist New Deal for America, which also heavily emphasizes anti-aging research and investment in public health initiatives that would help combat aging and disease. So these emergency proposals for fighting the COVID-19 pandemic and investing more in anti-aging research are aligned with Ben Zion's campaign platform as well. But I wanted to emphasize one aspect that was germane to our discussion earlier, which is section E8G of this 17-point plan that we have put forward, which recognizes specifically that biological aging is the #1 risk factor for mortality and severe complications from COVID-19 infections, as well as infections of every other sort, influenza, the common cold. And so we want to reverse biological aging as rapidly as possible. And this section advocates for an emergency $100 billion funding package for anti-aging research. One of our members, Mr. Mike DeVerde, has also advocated for making this an annual $100 billion funding package. So that option is going to be before our voters. Of course, in my view, the more funding for this field, the better, because life is the foundation for everything else. If you're not alive, you can't experience the world, you can't enjoy the world, you can't take part in economic activity, you can't develop new technologies or pursue any other goals that you might have. So I think, as you pointed out, Brent, it's a tragedy that the priorities of many people and businesses and governments have been so misallocated in our recent history that this basic foundation of life and healthy longevity has been neglected. And it's sad because life expectancy increased quite dramatically during the first half of the 20th century. And during the second half of the 20th century, it still increased, but the rate of increase slowed down. During much of the 21st century, unfortunately, in the Western world, that increase has stagnated due to certain factors like the opioid epidemic and other deaths of despair. It even declined in the United States during the middle of the last decade.
Which were, Gennady, I apologize to cut you off, but a lot of the opioid epidemic that's happened in America specifically was caused from the last financial crisis from 2008 to 2010. So I cut out there for a little bit and had to rejoin, but we really need to focus on what's happened to our economy thus far globally. About $23 trillion of global wealth has been destroyed in the last few weeks since COVID-19 has taken over. And so this could also just be the beginning, potentially financially. It could get a lot worse. And so I think
it's
definitely
that's just the beginning.
Yeah. It's tough to say definitely, like Bobby's like almost certainly right. Reality is uncertain how this will play it out, but it's certainly looking to be that way. And, it's just, I don't want people to get lost on that, there are consequences for all of our actions. And, if we have another global turndown, recession, it could lead to depression. Nobody knows, but it could be a lot worse than 2008. Yeah. And I follow a lot of financial, intelligent people, groups that I'm in, channels I follow, things on social media, and a lot of people who I highly respect think that this could be getting bad soon. And so think of all the death. And already the people who are dying right now, who are having heart attacks, who are having the normal things, and they're not getting the care that they need because of COVID-19. So I just want people to kind of think about the other side of this if you're buying into so much of the fear and everything. Also, there's other countries like the United Kingdom who, as of right now, to my knowledge, they have not closed down schools because the kids are typically have a safe area to be there. They're not affected by this. It's not a danger for them, for their mortality, and it's keeping them away from the elderly people. Instead, what we're doing is we're bringing them home, and then they might have the disease, and then they're spreading it to grandma and grandpa, who that is a risk factor for them.
Well, if you keep them in school, they're more likely to spread the disease because they're still going to come home. But if they're home, then they're quarantined. And so that's what's good about that, because kids are really dirty.
Well, there's I've read different things about that. And for example, the UK, if you just look at the data, right? The data is it's not spreading as fast in the UK. We'll see how it plays out. And they have not taken their kids out of school. And I hear your point there, Bobby, but if kids are at home all day it disrupts the entire workforce of their parents, of their workflow, because they then have to become, parents at home instead
it's a
of.
super important point, especially like nurses and stuff and doctors who really need to stay away from home and stay in their hospitals. But yeah, I mean, this is just the first pandemic, and we are doing a relatively good job. It's really promising to hear Donald Trump talk about a universal basic income. Like that's pretty incredible. I did not expect that at all.
Speaking of which, this is the second of our 17 points, Section E8B, an emergency universal basic income, an unconditional basic income of at least $1,000 per month. I know.
Hey, Gennady, are you looking at the USTP page?
Yes.
So okay. Do you think you can share that on your screen?
I thought Rowan was sharing that.
I can share the screen.
Okay.
But
yeah. Do you think it's important enough to look for?
Rowan, you're muted right now. So Rowan, if you could share that on the screen for everybody,
that would be great. I can share that.
So the viewers can follow along with Gennady.
Right.
Thanks, Bobby.
Okay.
So you go to our website, transhumanist-party.org, for those of you who are. Mm-hmm. The top post right now is our emergency 7-day exposure period for platform vote number 8 on COVID-19 response platform proposals. And if you scroll down to section E8B, that pertains to the emergency universal basic income, which is an immediate, unconditional basic income of at least $1,000 a month, and it could be greater, provided to every United States citizen for the duration of the COVID-19 outbreak without regard for individuals' means or other sources of income. Now, this is extremely important. For it to be unconditional, for there to be no means testing whatsoever, whether you're a millionaire or a billionaire, whether you have a job or you don't have a job, you need to be getting this basic income. The reason is means testing is cumbersome. It's expensive. It requires a lot of overhead. It takes time. And this is where the proposal currently in Congress falls short. Because the proposal currently in Congress, at least the version that has been floated to the mainstream media, is a basic income for people who made up to $75,000 based on their 2018 tax returns. And then it phases out to zero for people who make over $99,000 per year. Now, the problems with this are manyfold. First of all, people who make over $99,000 per year are not hyper wealthy by any stretch of the imagination. Many of them have been adversely affected by forced closures of businesses, by layoffs. Many of them are just middle-class individuals. But furthermore, pegging this to 2018 tax returns, of course, runs into the obvious problem of what happens if your 2018 income was higher than this threshold, but then it subsequently declined. And now you don't have that kind of income. Or you lost your job nonetheless. And costs of living can be high in certain parts of the country, particularly in Northern California, where even if you make a 6-figure income, you might not be able to afford a house. So many people with 6-figure incomes in Northern California have no savings and live in cheap 50-plus-year-old apartments that they share with roommates. And to suggest that these people are somehow wealthy enough to always weather these kinds of impacts is absurd. So from my standpoint, the only way a basic income can work to actually quickly get money into people's hands and tide them over is if it's immediate, unconditional. If you're a U.S. citizen, you get it no matter what. And yes, there will be a small handful of millionaires and billionaires who will get these checks.
It should be like we should be giving free tests out to the coronavirus. Everybody should be getting mandatory testing, even if they have it or not. A lot of countries are doing that, like South Korea and a couple others are doing mandatory tests, and because they have enough, because they're not dumb, and So that's helping a lot with reducing the numbers because if somebody knows that they have it or not, then they can be more confident about quarantining themselves or not.
Mandatory tests. That's something I just have to disagree with that because mandatory.
Well, no.
tests.
So Rowan, it's not mandatory vaccine testing. It's just mandatory testing if you have the corona.
Right.
Even still, though, like, why force people to do it? That's just crazy.
So this is section
especially doesn't involve getting like actually like a pinprick or something, like withdrawing blood.
No, you get something stuck in your nose. You get something stuck, like lodged in your nose, really high. It's a little uncomfortable, but it's not invasive. It's just kind of uncomfortable.
That's pretty invasive, man. They could put some weird thing on there, some weird chemical.
Dude, it's like picking your nose, dude. You just pick your nose really hard.
This is awful.
It's
a slippery slope, dude. Slippery slope.
They're working on cheaper, less invasive tests that are going to be less, let's say, burdensome for people. There's a home test kit that is being developed by Jonathan Rothberg. He is a scientist, kind of a DIY scientist who owns a large yacht, and he has actually converted this yacht into a research lab. So if
can
anyone
we put his face on the image, can we share his face because I want to contact that guy.
Yeah,
Jonathan Rothberg. He is developing a low-cost, easy-to-manufacture home test kit for the novel coronavirus, and this is just one of the initiatives. There are several private initiatives underway to develop these test kits and increase their supply. But this is germane to the USTP platform proposals. If you go to section E8M on our website, the United States Transhumanist Party proposes the immediate deployment of as many COVID-19 diagnostic tests as possible to the general population, with the aim of achieving universal testing of every American, even those without symptoms, free of charge. And Bobby pointed out some good reasons for aiming at that testing. Whether or not it's mandatory, it should be universally available. And that's
I shouldn't have used the word mandatory.
Right.
I mean, you probably do want to do mandatory, honestly, but of course that could be really sketchy. Like the government could get sketchy about it and start like doing weird biopsies or something.
Yeah.
But you might want to do something mandatory because, especially if a pandemic gets out of control. I mean, dude, like I want to know if my neighbor has a disease or not. That's gonna like wipe my family out.
Why? Just stay away from everyone. That solves the problem.
Yeah, but look, the corona is not that bad, Rowan. Like, dude, we have so many more pandemics like heading our way. Just think about like synthetic biology alone. Like that's just terrifying. So, and so the potential of a pandemic occurring in the near future over the next decade and two is huge. And that's just like, man, there are so many existential risks we are about to face. Like this is literally like I've made a Facebook post about this. Corona is kind of like pressing play on this great transhumanist game that Gennady Stolyarev has a great video about. And this game is going to be a freaking wild game, especially for this next 2 decades. And Corona just kind of pressed play, and it's really like no matter what the effects of the Corona is, like we have things that we're about to face because of developments in science technology that are going to be so awesome and so terrifying that this is boot camp right now that we're all going through, and it's like we have so much more to face. So I really hope people hear me say that.
Yes, well, this game is a deadly game indeed, and the stakes are extremely high. Now, in terms of universal testing, why is it desirable? It's desirable because it is necessary to understand the proportion of serious cases and fatalities relative to the actual total cases as opposed to the self-reported cases. It may well be that orders of magnitude more people already have COVID-19 than has been reported and officially tapped.
Like millions. There could be millions right now.
Right. So, but this is actually something that could mitigate some of the draconian measures, because think about it. If most people have it already, hypothetically, but we're seeing this current level of serious cases and fatalities, then it may be that the actual death rate turns out to be close to the seasonal flu. If that's the case. Now, keep in mind, about 37,000 Americans die on average every year of the flu. 22,000 Americans have died this flu season. And now, for COVID-19 in the United States, I have this dashboard, which everyone can find. It's ncov2019.live. So right now in the United States, 467.
Can you look that up? Bro?
Yes.
400.
Could someone send me the link, or where's that?
It's ncov2019.live. So this is the most detailed set of COVID-19 statistics that I've been able to find. It's broken down by country. It's broken down by state within the United States. And you can see serious cases. You can see recoveries. You can see total reported cases. And you can see death just day to day. So right now, at 7:25 p.m. Pacific time, I'm looking at this dashboard, and it shows 467 people deceased in the United States, and that's an increase of 120 today. So a fairly alarming increase, because
it's increasing exponentially.
But this virus has just very recently arrived in the United States. Essentially, as of 2 weeks ago, it only had a significant presence. And before that, there were just a handful of cases. But hypothetically, what if most of the population, or at least a sizable fraction of the population, has it already, but the vast majority have already experienced either no symptoms or very mild symptoms that they confused with the common cold or the flu? We won't know unless we have universal testing. But universal testing could actually help lower some of the alarm, because and this is the point that Dr. John Ioannidis pointed out in his article. He essentially wrote that we're making decisions about this pandemic without having adequate data. And as a result, there have been some very draconian decisions made, which may or may not be borne out by the facts about how virulent this disease actually is. So this article...
Gennady, real quick, maybe I cut out when you were mentioning that, but that's a fantastic article that you just referenced. Did you discuss that earlier? Maybe I cut out for maybe 2 minutes.
No, this is the first time I'm mentioning it, but for those who are interested, it's on statnews.com. The title is "In the Coronavirus Pandemic, We're Making Decisions Without Reliable Data." And John Ioannidis is known as a highly efficacious skeptic of common abuses of data. He has debunked many abuses of data in the field of psychology and pointed out that a lot of correlations that have been drawn and a lot of theories that have been posited based on those correlations actually don't have the support that many people thought they had. And a lot of academic papers are actually based on junk data, or misinterpretations of data, or misinterpretations of common statistical measures. So he has a reputation for being this kind of skeptical figure who points out flaws and fallacies in how people analyze data. And right now we do have very detailed attempts to compile data on the COVID-19 pandemic. This is information that I'm consulting on not just a daily basis, but multiple times per day whenever the data refresh. However, there could be some fundamental issues with how that information is gathered and how it gets to us, because people are largely self-reporting. If they have any considerable symptoms, they're going to the clinic and maybe they'll get tested. Also, if they're prominent political figures or actors or people who have priority access to these testing kits that are currently available. So if someone like Tom Hanks or Prince Albert II of Monaco or Rand Paul tests positive for COVID-19, that's big news. But maybe they're not that different from the rest of the population. Maybe a lot of people actually have the virus now, but have very mild symptoms or no symptoms and don't think that they have the virus. But if that's the case, that's actually good news for what the impact of this pandemic is going to be.
Yeah, I mean, being preventative, like in general, with everything, like pretty much everything, is like really important for society in general, but especially for health. And you know, this could help us transition into a sort of human longevity incorporation healthcare, where you know they are really advocating for being preventative and proactive, and you know, large sets of data. Like, man, imagine that amount of data we would have on everyone. That would be incredible, and we'd be able to learn how to defeat COVID-19 way faster. You know, like it not necessarily. Like, let's just say it's not enforced, even if it's something that just like, you know, is given for free. You know, they have like the you know, you just walk into a hospital and they'll give you the test. Like, that would be such valuable information, as so many people would actively go do that. And yeah, it would reduce stress. Like, it's just a total win-win. You know, the only bad part is if the government, you know, did something sketchy. You know, which, yes, the government can always do that, but with a higher level of, you know, of understanding of being preventative, you know, that's less likely to happen.
And I
just want to say something real quick. I want the audience to think about something. So this is still a very new virus. We're learning a lot about it, but we're still learning, you know, a whole lot on the other side of the coin. And so what I've seen from all the data and all the research that I've done is that it appears that if you're young and you keep a good immune system, even if you are exposed to the virus and maybe it even gets inside of you, doesn't even mean that you get it, meaning that it's going to be replicating, and you could just fight it off really fast by having a strong immune system, meaning that if you're standing right here and you get it, as I'm 35 years old and healthy, it just, boom, I don't even get it. My body immediately fights it off, compared to if I was a 95-year-old with a weak immune system, takes me over and I die. So then separately from that, you could get it, and then you could be a carrier of the virus, but you're strong enough and your body fights it off and you don't even express symptoms. Like, for example, Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert, the popular NBA players, they have the virus, but when you interview them, they say, I feel like I'm ready to go out and play a game of basketball. I'm showing no symptoms. I feel completely fine. So I just want to make sure the audience understands that this is how I'm perceiving this, from how I'm interpreting the data in my research. So it's just extra reason for you to stay as healthy as possible, get good sleep, do all the things that we're always talking about when you're following us to do to stay as biologically young as possible. Now more than ever, you really want to be doing that if you don't want to get this virus. So that's all I wanted to say.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So there are several other measures that the U.S. Transhumanist Party is putting forward for consideration that are relevant in this fight. First of all, Section E8L deals with rapid training for medical personnel. I've already spoken about rapid construction of hospitals. Those hospitals also need to be staffed. And this is a proposal for a rapid 3-month training and certification program for hundreds of thousands of new medical personnel, specifically for responding to the COVID-19 outbreak and other pandemics. So these new practitioners are not going to be fully fledged medical doctors. They're not going to have enough time to be as multifaceted as a medical doctor would be, or to have as wide-ranging a field of knowledge. However, they would have fundamental knowledge of epidemiology, first aid, sanitary practices, and patient care, including the operation of the devices used to assist severely ill patients. So they would be able to equip patients with the ventilators that are needed to keep them breathing. And we need essentially more people. If there is going to be an influx, a sudden massive influx of these older, severely ill COVID-19 patients, we need people to service them. And we also need these people to stay around in anticipation of future pandemics. So the plan is to compensate them generously if they're students. First of all, we'll recruit people who are highly educated or competent, who have a record of academic accomplishment and an aptitude for learning. And then if they have student loans, all the student loans will be forgiven if they commit to serving until the end of this outbreak. And then if they choose to remain in their positions afterward, they'll continue to receive training on effective pandemic response. And so they will be in a superior position to anticipate, prevent, and mitigate future outbreaks.
Yeah.
So the idea
That's
is to create a medical army. And if you think about how an army works, there are some members who are definitely more knowledgeable, more experienced than others, and they are higher ranking officers. Some of them are generals. So think of the doctors as the generals in this army. Think of the nurses or the physician assistants as the colonels or the lieutenants, people who can supervise these new emergency responders. And these emergency responders would be like the privates or the sergeants. They're going to be lower ranking personnel because they have less experience, but they can gradually work their way up through the ranks as well. So instead
that's a beautiful analogy, honestly. To help everybody grasp that we are at war with, the Grim Reaper, essentially. The Grim Reaper you can think of as a dictator, and he has a lot of members in their army and their essentially the army, right? They have all these different viruses and bacteria and diseases and car accidents, right? And he has a huge army against us, and we're being defeated right now on a level of not only amount of people who are interested in this, who need to be a part of this of our army, but also on the psychological front, right? We just psychologically aren't up for this game yet on this war. And so we really are being defeated right now, and we're losing, and we need to gather together and not the China shouldn't be claiming that the U.S. made this, right? Like with no evidence, right? At least like provide some evidence if you're gonna say something that embarrassing, like they must be so clueless to say something like that, so incompetent, unless they really have some evidence they're not sharing with us. It's like, come on, man, like your people are eating bats. Come on, like that is so embarrassing, and they aren't that dumb. Like it's so odd to me that China would be being this dumb, right? Because they aren't. They're the second smartest nation, possibly smarter than the U.S. And so it's really odd that they let these things happen when it's just such an easy fix, really. And I just think it's so beautiful how transhumanism is like the freaking answer to all of this. Like what happens with the pandemic? Well, universal basic income. Develop science, technology, communicate with each other better. Like that's all transhumanism. Should we help the homeless people? Well, the homeless people can spread diseases really easily, and they're intertwined within us. So we should help homeless people. Like it really is the solution to every single issue. So that's incredible.
And
I thought that homeless people lived in a parallel universe and therefore can't spread diseases. So, good point.
All right, should we take some questions, you guys think?
Section E8K of the USTP proposals, mandatory free housing for the homeless. The homeless are major transmission vectors for COVID-19 and other infectious diseases. They live in unsanitary conditions. They often don't have the means to wash their hands or utilize other basic hygiene precautions. So even if we didn't necessarily care about them as individuals for whatever reason, it's a public health priority to make sure they are housed, to make sure they are clean, and to make sure that they have the means not to be in these dire circumstances.
Yeah. Or another good reason to care about these individuals is because we need that intelligence. Okay, that's a huge amount of intelligence right there, a huge amount of hands that can be helping us, right? And intelligence is really the fundamental to society.
Yes.
And, something that I feel like a lot of people haven't realized. But that's huge amounts of intelligence that we could. We can reverse a lot of their pathologies. We can get them off drugs, and if you really get the ambition out of them, man, that's a lot of which people are trying to do right now. They're doing things where they can pay homeless people a little bit of money to clean up here and there. There's some really cool things, but if we really help the millions of homeless people, man, that's a lot of army people right there, right? That's a lot of people who can help out with the war. So hopefully, transhumanists and your political platform, the Transhumanist Party, can really capitalize on that human potential that's being wasted right now.
All right, how do you guys feel about taking some questions now?
Well, real quick, Rowan, before we do questions, can we have Gennady, for those who might be learning about USTP for the very first time, can you very briefly, maybe within 2 minutes or so, Gennady, just share some of the other policies, the overarching ethos of the USTP, so that folks who might be saying, this Gennady guy seems to be making sense, and these Bobby and Rowan and Max and Brent, I kind of like what they're saying. What are some other things about USTP? Since, really this is crazy times right now. We wanted to just be interviewing you, but COVID-19 is taking over even all of our interviews that we're just talking about longevity. So share with us a little bit real briefly about some other policies for USTP, please.
Yes, indeed. And people can find a concise summary of the USTP's policy priorities on our values page on our website.
Rowan, can you share the USTP where people can become a member? Can you share that?
Yes.
On the screen?
Let me see if I can see
that.
So
on our website, transhumanist-party.org, we have a values page, we have a platform page, we have a constitution which incorporates the platform, and we have the Transhumanist Bill of Rights, which is our aspirational document for how a future transhumanist society will conceptualize rights for sentient entities. It's quite extensive and innovative. And we also have a membership page, as you mentioned, Bobby, for anyone who wants to sign up for free membership. But for example, we support the vast majority of technologies that would improve the human condition, including, of course, research on eradicating disease, autonomous vehicles, electric vehicles, economical solar power, safe nuclear power, hydroelectricity, geothermal power, artificial intelligence, applications for the sharing of durable goods, biotechnology, nanotechnology, robotics, rapid transit, 3D printing, vertical farming, beneficial genetic modification of plants, animals, and human beings, electronic devices to detect and respond to trauma. We, of course, support a universal basic income, as I mentioned. We support individual privacy and liberty over how to apply technology to one's personal life. We do, of course, focus on preventing existential risk. So we do recognize certain technologies, such as weapons of mass destruction, technologies that infringe on privacy, engineering of new pathogens, should not be pursued because we want technology ultimately to contribute to human well-being. And a lot of our policies are an effort to harness technology for the well-being of individuals. So transhumanism has this term humanism in it as well. Transhumanism isn't opposed to the well-being of humanity. Quite the contrary. We are the heirs of 18th century Enlightenment humanism. We are the heirs of this idea that reason, science, and technology should be used in order to elevate the human condition, in order to solve the problems in our society, in order to eradicate diseases, in order to eradicate poverty, in order to eradicate needless conflicts among humans. And what you mentioned, Bobby, with regard to these recriminations that are being sent back and forth between the United States and China, those are futile right now. The entirety of humankind needs to unite in order to defeat COVID-19 and in order to continue fighting this war against death and disease. So transhumanism recognizes our shared humanity, the fact that unfortunately we are all vulnerable to these diseases to one extent or another, but fundamentally we are all vulnerable to aging. If we do nothing, biological aging will happen to us. And we will one day be in the position of those 80-year-olds or those 95-year-olds who are succumbing to COVID-19 today. That is an unacceptable situation. I believe we need to save as many people as possible. We need to save the people who are elderly today, but we also need to save ourselves. And for the new humans who are going to be brought into this world, I don't want to look a child in the eyes and say, well, sorry, you're going to become elderly and die too one day, and there's nothing we can do about it, and you should just accept it. So this book, once again, Death is Wrong, is the outcome of my refusal to accept that narrative, my refusal to accept those justifications and rationalizations for death. When I was told about death as a child, I immediately said, no, this is wrong. It is wrong for innocent people to die. And I decided when I was 5, after extensive protestations against this ostensible inevitability of human mortality, that I would devote my life to the struggle against death. And this is what I've been doing. I believe I should be doing more. I believe we should all be doing more in this struggle. But this situation, this pandemic, has really highlighted the urgency and the necessity of this fight. And
that's really profound that you had immortalist sort of an anti-deathist views as a child. I can't even imagine being able to grasp that idea. Even as a while I was working on my biomedical degree, on my bachelor's, I never would have thought that death would be defeated as soon as the evidence is indicating, suggesting. So I think that's really profound for you to have that effect. And yeah, everyone should buy Gennadi's kids book. And really, I mean, it's meant for really all ages. But that'd be really great to see a lot of people buying those. Yeah, just want to say that.
Yes,
and,
indeed.
And also, I want everybody to follow Gennadi and USTP. They have a huge social media presence. They're on all the major social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook. Gennadi has his own YouTube channel as well as Twitter. So we're going to have links in the description when you see this video on our Max Life extension channel, and also you're watching live right now, so we'll try and put those links in the chat as well for folks to go there and check it out and follow, subscribe, do all that for Gennadi.
Yeah, we all have separate YouTube channels also, so definitely go subscribe to each of our channels. We got Brett Nally is like 10,000 subs, talks about life extension. Gennadi Stolярov has like 3,000 subs, Rowan has 3,000, and I have the most, 600 subs. So I think I almost have 700. I don't know, one of those numbers. So definitely just make sure you subscribe to my channel at least. And but the most you can help, right? I mean, clicking a button is easy, right? And so everybody should be subscribing and stuff. But also contact us. Become a member of the USTP. DM me. I'm going to start holding Zoom meetings of like 50 to 100 people. Hopefully I can get that to a weekly thing, and we all just get organized. Everyone should be getting organized, sharing each other's life extension projects with each other. The old business model is over, and the new business model is this is how I defeat your death, this is how you defeat my death, and this is how we defeat everyone's death. So just keep that in mind always.
And also, one other really easy, quick thing people can do specifically on YouTube is hit that little bell and then click all from there. It really triggers the algorithms, and it really helps us all defeat death even faster. These
we should talk about our new channel too, our group channel. Brent.
Max Life Extension is the channel. We'll have a link in the description below to all the social media. And then also Transhumania is also a great YouTube channel that is Alex Kotov, who couldn't be here right now.
You should share that, Alex. You should share all the channels in the Max Life Extension channel, because we just uploaded a channel trailer. And we have like 15 interviews so far, or something like that, of esoteric scientists, people just as amazing as Gennady. With Peter Voss and Jose Cordero. And Bill Falloon and
Zoltan Itzvan, who Gennady mentioned is the founder of USTP, and so also Jim Stroll, and Bernadine, who are the founders of Radfest, which is a great event that we should also always be promoting. That's actually where I met Gennady for the first time in person, and we had a great time there. And so definitely. Really, really simple action items for everybody to really do your part from the click of a button from your home or out and about at the park on your smartphone. Just super easy, simple things.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So I wanted to briefly elaborate upon the U.S. Transhumanist Party's proposal for free and mandatory housing of the homeless. Because we do have some special ways in which that would be accomplished, and I think it could be achieved effectively. So, first of all, we would need to rapidly construct tiny homes. And these tiny homes actually have been deployed in the past by various private nonprofit organizations in places like Los Angeles and San Francisco, but the municipal governments have continually cracked down on these tiny homes, even though they really help minimize the negative fallout from this widespread homelessness problem. So we need to remove all local barriers, all of these building codes and zoning regulations, and the influence of NIMBYist special interest groups that prevent the granting of affordable housing to the homeless. All of these restrictions need to be immediately waived, and construction of tiny homes should be allowed. Now, every homeless individual discovered by local authorities would then be required to move into a tiny home as soon as one is available. And this should be something that these individuals welcome, because they would be granted free conditional title to the home. The home would be theirs. It would be their private property, with the expectation that they are going to have to work for it. So they're not just going to be idly sitting around in those tiny homes. They are going to be obligated to perform litter cleanup and other community service duties that would improve the cleanliness of their surroundings and reduce the risk of transmission of COVID-19 and other infections. These filthy conditions that the homeless often surround themselves by are some of the primary reasons why this epidemic is spreading, especially in large urban areas. So by giving them this free housing and requiring them to clean up this filth, we are solving two problems at the same time. And furthermore, we are also going to be creating more jobs, because these communities are going to be supervised by individuals who essentially are going to ensure clean living on the part of the formerly homeless. So there would be covenants and restrictions in these tiny home communities that would prohibit alcohol, recreational drugs. Of course, one of the biggest problems which perpetuate this crisis of homelessness is the fact that a lot of these people are addicted to substances that inhibit their productivity. If somebody is an alcoholic, if somebody is a drug abuser, that person can't just show up for a job interview and convince an employer that he or she is respectable and can hold a job. So part of this will be a rehabilitation initiative for the homeless. So they will be forbidden from touching.
Dang. So you're telling me that you're not just wanting to throw money at people like $1,000, which would be helpful. You're telling me that you actually took the time to think about universal basic resources and universal basic, just augmenting well-being, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible, right? Like Andrew Yang has probably done the most with explaining why we need UBI, but everyone really needs to talk to transhumanists, especially Gennady, about universal basic income, because it's not just automation for why we need it. It's pandemics and existential risks, and just so many more things. Like we could really get strategic about this, and make these tiny homes and help people out and gather data, and it's just such a win-win that to think otherwise is just just a lack of thinking about this. Something that Gennady, he has done a lot of thinking about this, as you can see.
Yes, thank you very much, Bobby. So this is what I wanted to say on the subject of how we can address the homelessness crisis in relation to the COVID-19 pandemic. But also, with regard to economic fallouts, we have to realize a lot of people have been damaged already by these forced closures of businesses. A lot of industries are just bleeding right now. Airlines, hotels, restaurants, even barbers. Now that so-called non-essential businesses have been ordered to close in many states, if you wanted to go for a haircut somewhere, you wouldn't be able to find a barber shop that is open. So these individuals, I believe, need to be fully compensated for the damage that was done to them, because this isn't going to be like a bailout from 2008, 2009. Those bailouts were to banks and other financial institutions that essentially damaged themselves through.
Yeah. Well, what about that $1.5 trillion bailout?
Which one are you referring to?
It just happen a few days ago. Like I read like a couple titles and I never read the full articles. But
it's not done yet, Bobby.
1.5?
It's all just currently proposals. But if I could say real quick, on YouTube, on CNBC's YouTube channel, I have been keeping up with the mainstream media in that regard. And I've been watching interviews of people like Carl Icahn, one of the wealthiest people on the planet, worth something around $20 billion. Mark Cuban, little 5, 10, 15-minute interviews where CNBC's been interviewing them about what they think. Chamath Palihapitiya, the founder of Social Capital, who's a billionaire, and really, really smart people like that. And Chamath in particular has pointed out that, hey, we have a choice now to not look back on this and say, why didn't we take care of the everyday Joe Schmo, the everyday average person out there? Let's not just give all the money to the people who caused this problem, to the elite, to the banks, to the wealthy people who don't even really need it. Let's support the 70% of our United States economy that we know keeps this thing chugging along, which is consumer spending. If consumers don't have money, this economy grinds to a halt, as we're already starting to see. So we have a chance now to give this money to people. If we're going to give the money away, like typically I'm a free market, economist, but we were so far off the tracks from that, and that's not where things are going. And things are crazy right now. So I'll support UBI, and especially right now, but let's give it to people who need it so that we can be compassionate and keep this thing going. So that's my 2 cents on it, because it's not done yet. They're still being discussed in Congress and the Senate, and decisions are not made yet.
Yes, indeed. And unfortunately, now these relief proposals have fallen prey to partisan bickering. The Republicans and Democrats have different versions. They're throwing accusations at one another. So they're using this as yet another theater for their incessant partisan battles, which is the last thing we need. I think both the Republicans and the Democrats are culpable in major ways for the social and economic fallout of this pandemic. And I'll say for the record, they all need to be voted out of office. And the Republican and Democratic leadership to resign and needs to cede power to Ben Zion and a transhumanist administration. I hope that they will do that. I'm not holding my breath for it, but this is what they ought to do. because we need people in office who are focused on human well-being and who are focused on principles of justice and proportionality and progress. But I think as part of that, every person who was adversely affected by governmental decisions, mandated closures, quarantines, preventions of large gathering, there are so many people who suffered immense and sudden economic losses as a result, need to be fully compensated because this was not their fault. Even if somebody from a public health standpoint makes the argument that these measures were necessary somehow to stop the spread of the pandemic, it's still the case that the people who suffered the economic fallouts didn't do anything to contribute to this problem. They were just living their lives. They were just running their businesses. So I would say, in addition to the universal basic income, the universal basic income needs to be sent to everybody in the same amount, whether or not they were adversely affected by this and to whatever extent. But as a second layer of aid, there should be a determination of who was adversely affected and how, and there should be full compensation for that. If someone was laid off, if someone could no longer pursue self-employed work arrangement, if somebody suffered a reduction of working hours as a result of these governmental measures, they need to be fully compensated.
So, when do you think Trump's universal basic income is going to go into effect? Do you think we have any chance of doing that?
Unfortunately, it's going to be diluted by other politicians who will be attaching certain qualifiers and restrictions to it that would prevent it from being a true UBI.
That's so annoying.
Yes. I mean, Lindsey Graham has been lobbying behind the scenes to change it from a UBI to just an expansion of unemployment assistance. And that defeats the purpose, because for conventional welfare unemployment assistance, you have to be unemployed to receive it. There's means testing. There is conditionality. And it's very expensive to administer. More money is spent administering these welfare programs than actually paying the affected people. And it is a disincentive to work, because if you're only paid while unemployed, then the moment you find a job, you stop receiving that easy payment. It's easy after you qualify for it. So that leads you to be less inclined to seek a job. A universal basic income, on the other hand, is in addition to whatever you can earn from a job. So even if you were displaced from the restaurant industry or the hotel industry, you can go into freelance consulting, and you can still consult with people virtually on subjects of your expertise and earn an income that way. But in the meantime, you should still receive compensation for your previous losses, and you should receive a universal basic income to tide you over.
Can you guys see Max's video?
No, Max's video went out.
Yeah, Max, your video's not there, man. But he might just went to go pee, maybe.
Okay.
Max is back. We haven't heard from Max in a while. Max, give us your thoughts,
Max,
please.
What do you got?
Yeah. So one of the questions that I had is, you're focused on children. I want to know what with your book that I was reading a little bit of, what is the focus point of how can we how can I word this? Why do you think it's so important that children learn about transhumanism, and what do you think the benefits of that, and any kind of barriers have you reached in terms of talking to children from parents, or anything else that you can share with us in terms of why that is?
Yes. So the reason why it's so important for children to learn about the feasibility and desirability of life extension, but that would be a bridge into transhumanism more generally, is that right now, most kids, when they first encounter this notion of death, they're viscerally repelled by it. They have the reaction that I had, that this is wrong, that this is unjust, but they're gradually sold into accepting it. They're told, oh, this is natural, this is just the circle of life, or it's God's way, or you'll have an afterlife after you die. And so over time, they get habituated to this notion of death, and this resistance, this initial revulsion, dies within them. And unfortunately, that death of the fighting spirit is a prelude to physical death. And throughout history, it makes sense why people inculcated these rationalizations into their children, because for the majority of human existence, death truly was inevitable. And people lived relatively short lifespans. They needed certain psychological comfort mechanisms in order to be able to function day to day. But now we are indeed on the cusp of defeating biological aging within our lifetimes. Dr. Aubrey de Grey of the SENS Research Foundation has revised his time frame downward to 17 years for the arrival of longevity escape velocity, when life expectancy can increase by more than 1 year every additional year if there is adequate funding. And Dr. de Grey's benchmark for adequate funding is actually about $100 billion with a B dollars. $100 billion is not that large a proportion of the total.
And Aubrey Gray is not going to buy 100 Teslas. He'll buy one Tesla maybe, but you give that man $100 million and he is not going to buy some fancy house or anything. That man is going to defeat aging. So it's really important that you provide him with funding, the United States Transhumanist Party with funding, me with funding, really all of us, because we are minimalist and we're becoming more minimalist, and we're really just devoting. It's not about money anymore to us. It's about life or death. So yeah, you're gonna see some seriously passionate people here soon.
Well, to be fair, Bobby, I'm not a minimalist in my tastes. I am a maximalist, as you can see with the decor behind me. But the caveat is I am running out of space in my house for decorative objects, so I'm not going to be spending very much more money on those. I am intending to spend larger sums of money on supporting anti-aging research and other initiatives. I've been contemplating, for instance, holding what will now be a virtual race to cure aging, a running event, but more on that later this year. But suffice it to say, $100 billion, based on this proposal that the U.S. Transhumanist Party has exposed, in the first year is going to generate the kind of funding that Dr. Aubrey de Grey thinks is necessary for research to proceed at the optimal pace. So if we have $100 billion invested in the field, we may be able to have a 50% probability of getting to longevity escape velocity in 17 years. That's in time for all of us to be able to benefit from these treatments while we're still relatively young biologically, while we still hopefully haven't had any critical failures to our organisms.
Hey, everybody, real quick, Gennady, you just made me think. If you all haven't yet, remember, laughing is maybe the best form of medicine. I've actually studied comedians and centenarians in longevity, and the really good comedians, so many good comedians have lived super long lives. I could give tons of examples. George Burns comes to mind, the living legend right now, Betty White, who, quick story, if you guys watch Bill Andrews quite a bit, and he talks about, hey, we haven't reversed aging until Betty White walks out on that stage and looks 25 years old. I didn't know this until just last year, but Bill Andrews' dad was a movie producer. Bill Andrews grew up down in Southern California, and Bill Andrews' dad was a producer for many of Betty White's shows. So Bill Andrews grew up with Betty White.
What the heck? Are you serious?
Yeah, Bill Andrews grew up with Betty White coming over to his house for dinner, and he grew up with her. So this is personal for Bill Andrews when he says that. He really wants to reverse Betty White's.
Yeah, because his definition for aging, his simplistic definition is really beautiful. Everybody should check out that YouTube video where he talks about how he compares Betty White when she's older to when she's younger, and he's like, yeah, it's kind of obvious. We all kind of know what aging is at the end of the day, but I didn't know his dad was a movie producer. Man, I would have figured he would have done a movie by now, about aging. Maybe his dad helped out doctoring.
Unfortunately, Bill Andrews' father passed away, relatively recently from complications of aging. And he's trying to keep his mom alive, who's in her early 90s. So, this is personal to everybody. All four of my grandparents are dead. But just a fun fact on that. But what I really wanted to say is the great George Carlin. I've watched all 18 of his HBO stand-up specials. I've watched probably every stand-up I could ever find on YouTube over the years. And from, I think in the 1970s, he had a bit that he talked about with stuff. He was like, why do you have a house? To put your stuff in. And then he's like, why do you get a bigger house? Because you got too much stuff. So, sorry, you just channeled my inner George Carlin when you were talking about all your stuff, Gennady. But the millennials are moving past stuff. I don't care about stuff anymore. I try and get rid of stuff. I try not to use Amazon, but only for essentials, to buy like certain foods and things that I really need that helps for health. But Bobby's general point that hopefully everybody realizes that we are pretty frugal people here in the transhumanist community. We're not going to be wasting money on mansions and private jets and, private islands in the Pacific or whatever. We're really going to put that capital to work in the most intelligent way to defeat aging or really try and slow it, stop it, and reverse it as much as possible.
Yes, indeed. And with regard to the benefits that one can derive from supporting this research, keep in mind, you can't really enjoy property or much else in life if you're ailing, if you're suffering, if you're dead. You certainly cannot enjoy any of that. So I often think about what are the fundamental preconditions for a good life. And I like to focus on the basics. And if there's something that is enjoyable but not essential, I could pursue it afterward if I have the available time and the available resources. But for me, the basics really have always been at the forefront, but now especially with this pandemic, if one thinks about all the ways that one had been spending one's time before, and all of the ways one can no longer spend one's time, all of the events that no longer exist for one to attend, all of the social gatherings, all of the major forms of economic activity or recreational activity that one can no longer participate in, no matter how much money one has. I can't buy myself a way out of this pandemic. If I had $1 million, I couldn't reverse the social impacts that have occurred. So I think prevention and waging war on these kinds of problems are crucial because they affect everyone's standard of living. They affect the range of activities available to everyone. And I will say on the positive side, technological progress also affects the opportunities available to everyone. The fact is, most people today have access to devices like these. 30 years ago, they were much bigger, clunkier, far more limited in their functionality, and they were only available to multimillionaires. They were status symbols for multimillionaires. But very rapidly, in historical terms, the technology progressed. It became much improved in its functionality. And this is essentially now a universal communication device that's very readily affordable, so that even a subsistence farmer in sub-Saharan Africa is more likely to get one of those devices than he is to get clean water, unfortunately. But at least he can use those devices to communicate and improve his life. So this is an example.
Johnny, can I ask you about what are your thoughts on transferring your consciousness? I don't want to stop you from. I think you're still going. Did you want to keep continuing on your on what you're talking about?
I just wanted to generalize the point that technological progress pushes outward the boundaries of what is possible, and it should matter less where you stand relatively in society, whether you're just a person of ordinary means or a perhaps a little bit more prosperous or wealthy, as long as you're not destitute, as long as you have the basic necessities of life. What matters more is the general level of advancement and prosperity and stability of the society in which you live. Because if you have a rapidly advancing society with a high rate of technological progress, with good medical care, with good infrastructure, and we do have a lot of failing infrastructure in the United States, unfortunately, again, because of restrictions on development that need to be urgently lifted. But if you have a good general societal environment in which you live, then it matters less where you are in that society. It matters more how well the general society is doing. And on the other hand, if you're at the top position in terms of status or power in a society that is destitute, in a society that lacks access to these advances, you are likely to die an early death. A lot of medieval kings died in their 20s and 30s, even though they were kings. I wouldn't want to trade places with them. A lot of Roman emperors were deposed within a year of becoming emperor, especially in certain epochs of Roman history. And that's because the society was marred by strife and this perpetual war of all against all. I wouldn't want to be a Roman emperor. I'd rather be below the poverty line in America right now than a king in the 1600s in France.
Yeah, or even a lot of the popes. Even a lot of the popes, I think, is another good example, not just the kings, because popes were kind of kings in history. And you can see that you can look at the amount of time that popes were popes, right? And, different church leaders. And, they had to decrease life expectancy also. Not until now, right? They didn't have anything as close to what we have with not only life expectancy, but with how long they can be the pope or a church leader, because they can stay alive now. And so, for religious folks, start evangelizing and teaching people to live, right? And so that you can maintain your position and continue to try to convince people to live while you're alive today. I at least live a couple thousand years to think about it before anybody chooses death, because I'm kind of afraid that there might be a mass suicide event 10 or 20 years from now when we can actually extend lifespan. A lot of people might be choosing death.
I don't think they will, because they're not choosing death now when they get sick. The lifespan extensions are going to be incremental. You can't take a pill to render you immortal or invulnerable. That's a common public fallacy. Rather, in order to reverse biological aging, you periodically reset the clock. You reverse the damage of aging. And this often would be done in combination with treatments for specific diseases. So if someone is a patient of chronic heart disease or diabetes or Alzheimer's disease, and they go in to get these rejuvenation treatments, perhaps even their primary motivation would be to get rid of those disease conditions for good, which they would agree should be eliminated. So,
Rowan, real quick, you're still live streaming, right, Rowan?
Yes.
Okay, Brent, can you start recording, because Max was recording last time?
Oh, wow, really good point. And on some housekeeping notes real quick, you guys might have seen in the live stream, I've been frantically putting in everybody's social media. Gennady, just put in your YouTube and your Instagram, and put in mine and all the Max Life Extension, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, on and on and on links. So question for you, Rowan, is there any way to take those live chats and turn those into the comments once the live stream is over, or is that just all going to be lost? Because I'm going to stop doing it. I've been doing it on my phone in the background.
The live chat gets saved. It doesn't become comments, but they get saved. So it's a real time. You can watch back the live chat in real time.
Save for people to see them. All right, so then everybody, if you're watching this not live, check the live chat for all those links that I just put in there for you to subscribe, like, follow. So check those links there, and then we'll put a full link in the description of this video when it's over as well. I'll make sure.
You guys about ready to do some questions? Questions and comments?
Sure, Rowan. Why don't you go ahead and do that for Gennady, please.
All right. So first, this is kind of a comment based upon what we were saying. Longevity Girl says anything mandated is a very slippery slope. No one's medical freedom should ever be in question. I agree with that. What do you guys think?
You said longevity. Longevity Girl.
Yeah, Longevity Girl said that. So she's back.
That's her name, dude. Dude,
she's back.
That's so awesome.
Up, man.
Dude, that's a really good name. I'm gonna name my child that.
And I think in Longevity Girl's point, I think that Bobby, afterwards, a few seconds later, said, "Hey, I misspoke. That's not really what I meant."
Yes.
What Bobby was really saying is that we really want everybody to have the opportunity to get tested if they want to be tested, and we should be encouraging them to get tested if they do have COVID-19 or they think that they do. And the reason why somebody wouldn't want to do that is because they fear their government or they fear their authority, figures in the healthcare. And that's not a good thing. And a lot of people have that fear right now. And a lot of it, like as Rowan pointed out, is well-founded because we do have a huge lack of trust in our institutions, globally. And the reason why that is, in most cases, is because they've lost that trust. They've messed up. So, now is the time for us to, fight to help get that trust back by, convincing or doing our best we can to get our institutions and our leaders to do the right thing here in this crisis. And so far, they just have not been doing that, for the most part. And so, that's why we're here to do what we can and use the resources that we can to try and make a change.
Yes, I so agree.
Enforcing preventative measures is a really that's something that should be discussed way more and refined. Like if we do that, if we were capable of having the politics all correct with enforcing preventative measures, ideally you'd want people to be educated enough to just do it themselves. But we're not really in that situation right now, where most people are educated enough to be to make that competent decision. But I think that's something we should definitely talk about more, because there's a huge amount of diseases right now, and if you had that large amount of data, our statistics, our measurements and results would be much more better to be able to defeat diseases and really death in general, right? Like self-driving cars, for example, is going to be a great data set for us to defeat car accidents. And it's really just, we need to science society, right? Like we need to science the B word out of society. So
while at the same time maintaining our freedoms.
Yes.
And never get down the slippery slope.
Real quick, I want to get another plug in for Gennady real quick. In the first 2 issues of the Immortalist magazine, I read both of Gennady's articles. He wrote one in issue 1 and issue 2, and they were both phenomenal. And I know that you have one in the 3rd issue. I just haven't gotten around to reading it yet because I've been very busy. So I just want to plug Gennady and the Immortalist magazine. Definitely subscribe to that magazine. Denora Delphin is the creator of Immortalist magazine. She's a fantastic human. I haven't met her in person yet, but she's such a great person. So please subscribe to Immortalist magazine and read Gennady's articles. Nice. And Gennady, any other things you want to share on that?
Yes. So I have articles in each of the 3 issues of I Am Magazine, which is the Immortalist magazine. You can download those issues for free. And several. So the first issue actually has 2 articles. One of them is with regard to answering common questions on the impacts of indefinite life extension. What will be the benefits? What will be the costs? I think, Rowan, you need to search for I Am Magazine. And
Yep. And you can, Rowan, you should also be able to go to the Immortalist Club, and then it will take you there. I think you had it.
Yes. So
click on the red where it says 3rd there.
Yeah.
Oh.
And then you can pull his recent article.
Right. Right now they're featuring the 3rd issue. Oh, and look at this video. This is my interview with Steel Archer on the Detonation Show discussing these emerging proposals to defeat COVID-19 back when there were 11 proposals. They have since been expanded to 17. But this is another resource you can go to for a thorough discussion of these contemplated measures. In addition, in this issue, I have an article called Feedback Loops and Individual Self-Determination. It's essentially an article about how do people get to have the skills and interests and aptitudes that they do. And I argue...
The Moralist magazine's in contact with Francesca. I just saw an image of her.
So... If you scroll, I think it's around page 48 where my article is included. Oh, and there's Brent's as well.
Yeah, so is Brent's.
So,
dude, that magazine's pretty sexy.
Yeah.
And yeah, she actually just updated it this time. The first 2 issues didn't have hyperlinks and things like that, but there's a link right there to my YouTube channel that hyperlinked. So this is the first issue she's done that. You know, she's iterating. This is a great example of how to start any type of business. You know, you get the first issue out, you listen to your customers, you listen to feedback, and you just keep iterating. You just keep improving. So the second one's better than the first one. The third one's better than the second one. I'm sure the fourth issue is going to be even better and better and better. So just keep listening, keep, you know, supporting each other, and keep taking constructive criticism. And yeah, this one's even better than the others. So huge props.
This is it's really.
Here I am.
It's what I call the immortalist business model. But it's really like the most beautiful business model so far. I mean, I don't really understand business that well personally. You know, I have a rudimentary understanding, and I'm talking to a lot of wealthy investors though, and like impressive business people. So they're teaching me a lot at a really fast pace because I'm building a life extension company right now. Actually, we'll be selling products relatively soon. And it's actually going to be like a multi-billion-dollar company. It's going to be really impressive. And my business partner is Max. His laptop died, or I don't like to use the D word, but so he needs to charge that. So he's doing that, but yeah, stay tuned for that. And so I mean, this business model is just so incredible. Like Peter Voss said, you know, he's developing artificial general intelligence. He might be like at the very forefront, right? This guy's so impressive. We interviewed him, and he called it the financial escape velocity, where he's like, you know, soon people are going to be like, you know, knocking on my door, you know, just throwing money at us, and you know, that's really what's going to happen to a lot of us. You know, I already have like 50 people who've DM'd me so far in the last like 2 weeks maybe, who've told me like, Bobby, like, how can I help you? How can I volunteer my time and help you? You know, build your company, and how can we help each other defeat death, right? Because that's really the new monetary system. You know, that's the new economic system, is defeating death. You know, increasing well-being, increasing longevity, increasing intelligence. And so once you become an immortalist and you kind of click, you know, your conversation with people is a lot different when you're trying to make money and stuff. You know, you realize that. Yes, money is really important, and we need to gather that so that we can develop and defeat death, and corruption will be defeated. It has to be. I mean, there's no other way, right? They're going to die if they're not immortalists, if their death is. They're going to die, so we just have to make sure they don't take us out with them. And, you know, our passion is unreal, so definitely, you know, DM us, become members of the party, you know, get organized and start developing. You know, that's our demographic, and we are the most important demographic, I believe, on this planet. Maybe super intelligence is more important, if that's emerged already or not. But yeah, so you know, the world, we're about to show the world something very impressive very soon. You know, our demographic.
So Rowan, you're
Beautiful,
showing
Bobby.
first.
Yeah. Janati, can you give it, Rowan, get to Janati's article. This is the second issue, I think. And then Janati, if you can give a brief summary of your article, maybe we can go through all 3 of them.
Right,
That would be
second
fantastic.
issue, that would be, show me on the screen here where I get to it.
Well, go back to the third one real quick. Rowan, if you go to the very top of the screen.
Just on? This one?
Yeah, and then go to Janati's so
Where's
that people
that?
can see it. I think this is the second one.
Scroll the other way.
Let's scroll the other way.
This is the first issue. scroll forward
Oh,
in the magazine.
Yep. And then, this was a really good article here. There it is.
That's fine. So, impacts of indefinite life extension. This was the one I was mentioning first. So, I'm answering common questions about what would be the positive impacts and if there are going to be any negative impacts. I don't believe there would be any negative impacts to indefinite life extension. There would be some adjustments, certainly changes to how societies are structured, how economies are structured, but they are going to be either wholesale beneficial changes or simply adaptations to a very favorable reality. But I explain in this article the many ways in which indefinite life extension is going to improve the quality of life, the experience of life, the opportunities that individuals possess, and also improve society by rendering people more far-sighted, more focused on overcoming big, long-term challenges. So that's the first article in this issue. But this issue actually has two articles. If you keep scrolling, it has my new decades message for the 2020s. And this is a message that I recorded on December 31st, 2019. And
this is right here.
Yes. And I also have a video by this title, New Decades Message for the 2020s. And in this video, instead of making personal New Year's resolutions, I make 10 New Decades resolutions for humanity, what I hope for humanity to achieve during the 2020s. And I still, despite this COVID-19 pandemic, believe that all of these goals are eminently achievable. And these are incremental goals on the way toward winning this war against death and disease and improving the human condition more generally. So if you're interested in what my New Decades resolutions for humankind are, please read this message or find my video on YouTube and consider how you can contribute to the achievement of these goals.
Yeah, definitely. Did you guys want to move on or keep talking about this, or did you want to answer people's questions?
Well, I wanted to answer the question on mandates and slippery slopes, because I do think it's an important subject for consideration, especially as many of the rules of policy making are being rewritten at a very rapid rate right now. And I have had a long history of association with the libertarian movement. I myself have a lot of libertarian sentiments. I'm not part of the organized libertarian movement at this time. However, I believe that the presumption should always be in favor of individual liberty. With that being said, people don't have the right to harm other people. And if there are restrictions on what an individual may or may not do, if there are any mandates, they should be for the purpose of preventing involuntary harms inflicted on others. So, for instance, this idea of mandatory housing of the homeless, it is because the homeless are disease vectors. And we want to prevent that spread of disease, which other people don't want to catch. Now, I think whenever there's a mandate, it should be done in a humane way. It should not be done in a way to worsen the quality of life for that individual. So mandatory housing of the homeless, I believe, should come with the property title to that house. It should come with a better standard of living for the person being housed. So nobody should ever be mandated to take an action to their detriment, which is why I am quite furious about many of these forced business closures, because they ruin people's livelihoods. And unless there's just compensation for that, it is a tremendously unfair decision, and it is a violation of these business owners' rights. It's a violation of their employees' rights who wanted to work there and who would have been able to work there otherwise. So for me, if there's a mandate, it has to be in order to prevent involuntary harms imposed on others. And there has to be a way to either compensate the individual for the inconvenience of that mandate, or clearly show to that individual that as a consequence, that individual will be better off.
Excellent.
I'm all about freedom. Freedom.
Gennady, before we move away from your Immortalist magazine, did you want to talk about your other two articles at all, or are you good on that?
So I'll just mention them, Rowan. You don't have to pull them up. But in the second issue, I have an article that addresses this common misconception that if longevity extending treatments are developed, they will only be available to the wealthy. And I explain essentially that all technologies go through stages where they begin just like the clunky cell phones that were only available to the millionaires but didn't work particularly well. And they get to a stage in a sufficiently free and competitive market where they are quite affordable and quite universally available. And I believe this is going to be the case with any medical breakthrough, any breakthrough that improves human health, because right now, if you think about fairly advanced technologies, say robotic surgical procedures or advanced imaging scans, MRIs, most people can get access to them, not just the ultra rich, even though at some point in time, these were cutting edge technologies. So my article addresses this prospect, as well as the fact that the wealthy are often getting the first generations of treatments that are experimental and not as reliable and have more adverse side effects. So they are actually being experimental guinea pigs for the rest of us. I would not want to be in that position if I could avoid it. I would rather be the beneficiary of a later generation of treatments that are more reliable, that have more evidence behind them, but somebody who is wealthy but biologically senesced and may have a debilitating or even terminal condition like Alzheimer's disease may have no other options. So it's quite good that that person gets to be a pioneer with these experimental treatments at great personal risk, but for the benefit of the rest of us. So that is my article in the second issue of the Immortalist magazine, IM magazine. In the third issue, I mentioned it briefly. My article is called Feedback Loops and Individual Self-Determination. And this is an article about skill acquisition, self-improvement, how a person makes decisions that then lead to other decisions in a kind of self-reinforcing cycle. And I'm very much an advocate of the opportunity that an individual has to improve his or her own position in life. I'm not a determinist. I don't believe that people are condemned to be a certain way. I believe that more so than nature or nurture, it is the self, it is the will that leads to what a person becomes in life, what a person is able to do, what a person chooses to do. So we're not fated to end up in certain positions in life. There may be very difficult external circumstances like the pandemic that we're dealing with right now, but nonetheless, we all have choices. We have choices how to respond, what we're going to do, how we're going to spend our time, and how we're going to improve ourselves. And this is extremely important because if we are to win this war, and if we are to win in the current phase of this war, we need to be continuously focused on self-improvement. We need to be continuously focused on active measures that we can take to defeat this enemy.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome.
So
all right. What was that?
There have been some other questions that I can address very briefly. So Mike DeVerde, who is a longtime viewer of transhumanist content related to the U.S. Transhumanist Party, asks, in this war on death, do you think that we should take $100 billion from the Defense Department budget and allocate it to this war on death? So this is one possibility. The proposal under consideration in Section PHE states there should be an annual $100 billion funding package for the war against aging. Now, I'm not fond of raising taxes at all if it can be avoided, so I am going to pursue whatever other reasonable means exist. And the fact is, right now, the United States military receives more funding than the 8 next best funded militaries combined, and it has a lot of unnecessary presence overseas. So, yes, it very well could be that the Defense Department could afford to transfer $100 billion each year. I believe that is what Mike DeVerde meant, to initiatives on research to reverse and defeat biological aging. That is one possibility for where those funds could come from.
Who did you say was Mike DeVerde? You said you knew him?
Yes, he's a member of the U.S. Transhumanist Party. He's a frequent viewer of our videos. He's a great supporter of the Debt Nation show as well, which has pretty much daily interviews now with figures within the transhumanist movement as well as other experts in a variety of disciplines. So we're very pleased to have his support for these wide-ranging endeavors.
Yeah, Mike Verde and Longevity Girl, you should DM us, and you can find me on Facebook. I'm on Facebook a lot. I'm trying to get onto Twitter, and let's help each other with our life extension projects. Maybe we can even get you guys in, do a video with both of you, since and really anyone. But and we'll be live streaming a lot more soon, so we can get you in on videos in there. And, yeah.
All right, so next question. Let's take the one by Longevity Girl here. Will Corona ever be eradicated? I would say...
want it to be...
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I want it to be eradicated, but as a viral disease, it's going to be difficult to do initially, because even if the number of cases falls dramatically because of the way this virus spreads, it could continue to infect more and more people until one of two outcomes happens. Either everybody who's ever going to be infected by it has gotten it, and whatever has happened has happened. If they survive, they build some sort of immunity. If they die, then they don't. And that's a very unfortunate outcome. The other outcome would be if there's a vaccine or a more effective cure developed for it, and then it's widely administered to the population. So unfortunately, with the current restraints on federal research in the United States, with the fact that although they are beginning safety tests right now, Dr. Anthony Fauci has said in the best case scenario, the vaccine will only be developed a year from now, and even then it couldn't be deployed to the general population right away because they would be worried about side effects. So in the meantime, it would be a kind of epidemiological game of whack-a-mole where there may be new outbreaks. Even after older outbreaks are contained. Sometimes these pandemics come in waves. The 1918 Spanish influenza came in 3 major waves, and the second wave was the deadliest by far in the winter of 1918 to 1919. So we hope that there could be massive infrastructure buildups that are ready to deal with these waves, which is why it's important for this infrastructure not to just be temporary for any surges in hospital capacity or staff, not to abate after the first wave has passed. And we're going to have to be continually vigilant. Now, I hope that an effective vaccine can be developed. I hope that the vast majority of the population will get very mild cases of this COVID-19 and will develop immunity so that in subsequent seasons it would be very difficult to distinguish from an ordinary cold or a mild case of the flu.
Yeah, that's what I heard will happen. It will just kind of integrate itself into society, and it'll be like the normal flu.
It might be good that it becomes a yearly an event, an annual sort of infection, because then that would really, because how quickly is everyone gonna get bored of this, right? Like after this crisis ends, like what's it gonna take us, like a week to get bored of this conversation? So like if we had something that was like a yearly alarm clock, that could help us, become more preventative, to advance science technology better, to aim at ways to defeat death and prevent existential risks.
Now, I would be careful about that, Bobby, because we don't want actual problems to exist that don't need to exist simply for the purpose of calling people's attention to the existence of problems. We have plenty of other problems to combat, plenty of other diseases. In fact, I think this is a good bridge into Section E8F of the USTP proposals, which involves rapid research into cures for COVID-19, the common cold, and influenza. So the idea here is, right now, there is a lot of interest in finding a vaccine against COVID-19. There is a lot of research that is going to be proposed and undertaken. The USTP advocates for an immediate $100 billion funding package for the rapid development of a COVID-19 vaccine. That's in addition to our $100 billion funding package for anti-aging research. And we want human trials to begin as soon as possible. We want volunteers to be accepted into human trials as soon as practicable. This is already happening in certain cities in the United States, but we want it to happen more rapidly. We want it to happen on a wider scale. Now, the key is, as this research is ongoing, there will be synergies from this research to help develop what we finally need, a cure for the common cold. How in the world, in the 21st century, with all the medical advances we have, we do not still have a cure for the common cold, as well as more effective vaccinations against influenza. We do have annual flu vaccines, but they're only about 60% effective. They don't anticipate all of the strains of the flu that exist during any given season. And again,
imagine getting a vaccine from Corona, the COVID-19, that just sounds so scary.
And actually, just to define terms here, as Gennady just alluded to, the flu vaccine mutates every year. So he gave an average number. Some years it's as low as 10% effective. And let's also define what that term effective means. It doesn't actually cure you or prevent you from getting the flu. What it does is it suppresses symptoms. And in people who are already very unhealthy with weak immune systems, you don't necessarily want to have the flu and then not have the symptoms of it, because it could be wreaking havoc on you internally. Meanwhile, you're unaware that you actually have it. So there are massive problems still with the flu influenza vaccine. And I've been watching a show on Netflix. I've been really busy with these guys the past couple of days, but I'm watched the 2 episodes called Pandemic on Netflix, and they are following a gentleman and his team. He's originally from somewhere down south, Costa Rica, or no. It's one of the South American countries. And he's in San Francisco where his team is, and they go down there, and basically they're trying to create a universal, complete cure for the flu. And I'm interested to get back and finish that show to see, what progress they're making. But it just shows you all how difficult it is and where we are at this point in time. So for all you conspiracy theorists out there who think that, the coronavirus, COVID-19, was created in a lab somewhere in China or something, I mean, according to the smartest epidemiologists that I've, followed and listened to, they say that that's basically impossible, because this virus is so complex and mutating so rapidly that, human ingenuity and all of our best supercomputers and everything combined cannot create something like this. This is still nature's
Rowan, do you think you can? Rowan, do you think you can share on the screen 2000? Just type in coronavirus pandemic 2015 Nature, because there's an article published in Nature in 2015, and it may have been predicting this pandemic, and I'm pretty sure they seeked funding in 2016. I think Trump didn't give it to him or something like that. I didn't read
one
on
article by Nature.com. I don't know if it's
2015.
I think I need the
Yeah. Press Nature.com one. The Nature.com one. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll look for it, and actually I'll send you a link. But try to find the look for the citation there, and I'm pretty sure in the title it says coronavirus, like potential coronavirus pandemic coming from bats in 2015, which is pretty, like, if that really does trace back to that article, that's pretty impressive. That science was that prepared. But I'll look for it. I'll send you the link.
Okay.
And even just real briefly on that note, I think, Rowan, when we were chatting privately or on a live stream or something, you mentioned that Tom Hanks movie that was directed by Ron Howard from like 2016. I think that the movie is called Inferno, and so that kind of tends to spur some of the conspiracy theorists. But, if you look into a lot of these stories of Hollywood or whatever that seem so like crazy, like, oh, it gets the conspiracy theorists going, you take a step back and you realize that when you listen to these epidemiologists, you realize that they know how these diseases kind of start and spread, and that they're coming from animals and things like bats. And they know also like where they're most likely to start, in a place like China, where they still eat exotic animals like bats, and they do it in a place where it's heavily populated in these markets in these huge cities like in Wuhan territory in China. So, if you add up all the data and you just look at the science and listen to the experts, it's not quite as surprising that really intelligent people have predicted something along these lines. And what they have also predicted that we've touched upon during this show that we really need to like hammer home and emphasize is that COVID-19 is really just a virus that's affecting people of extreme elderly age for the most part, and people of compromised immune systems. And the next virus, statistically speaking, probably will not be so kind to us humans. And influenza, doesn't discriminate to age like this virus does. Influenza kills children. And so we need to really use this as a wake-up call globally, regardless of what side you're on. We need to use this as a wake-up call to be prepared for the next virus. It's probably going to be worse.
It's a dude. It's a screen,
please.
What?
That's
bat soup. That's pretty bad, huh?
Not sure
that's so horrible, dude.
I am personally just aghast and repelled by the consumption of exotic animal meats. Now, I'm not a vegetarian. I do eat common meat types like chicken and beef and pork, but eating
meat that's been like cleaned, not meat like straight out of a forest that's been laying around for months.
I do not want my meat to look like the animal it came from. I want to have this association in my mind because I am also repulsed by the sight of death, and anything that reminds me of death is just quite disturbing to me.
Well, Gennady, is this also evidence that we need globalism? Because we can't let China do this again. We can't let them continue to not regulate their food and allow people to eat whatever they want. And just so many other reasons. Global warming, all the existential risks, let alone all different ways of dying. We really, like, our neighbors, like, we don't have fences up. Like, our borders are invisible, everyone. And, what happens when you don't, look over these people over here on the planet? Well, guess what? Like, now you're infected with a disease because they didn't want to tell their people to stop eating bats, because they didn't want to transition to electrical engines and stuff.
We need a framework for international collaboration on effective disease response. This is actually a good bridge into Section E8O of the USTP proposals, which holds that as a proactive measure, the United States should spearhead an initiative to collaborate with other wealthy nations or by means of the World Health Organization to set up a financial and material package of supplies and infrastructure to be deployed anywhere in the world in case a pathogen is found that needs to be rapidly contained in a foreign nation. And this could be particularly important if the country of origin itself cannot prevent that outbreak due to poverty or a lack of resources. An example of that was AIDS. AIDS originated in Africa, again, because of bad behaviors, I think, with regard to consuming an exotic animal. I think somebody ate an ape. And yes, I agree. Consumption of exotic animals is disgusting and it needs to stop. But I think this needs to be embodied in a framework of more comprehensive collaboration and disease response. I don't want this to be seen as anti-Chinese rhetoric, because it's not. I don't think most Chinese would eat bats. I think this is a subset of the population that just needs to stop doing that. But the United States should collaborate with China. It should collaborate with other developed nations in order to bring about this outcome.
How do you think about Donald Trump calling it the Chinese virus?
I don't think that's productive, because right now China has more or less effectively contained this epidemic, and the death toll in Italy has surpassed that in China. Again, looking at the coronavirus dashboard right now, the death toll in China thus far is 3,270. That's NCOV 2019 .live. And in Italy,
I think I just read an article today of the Atlantic. I think they discussed how like we kind of everyone suspected that how China's been boasting about how they're having it under control. Well, supposedly a lot of doctors are whistleblowing, saying like that's not the case at all. Like this is not anywhere near under control in China.
Well, time will tell. I know the Chinese government initially downplayed the epidemic, and the doctor who originally raised concerns about it was essentially approached by the authorities, told to stop spreading rumors. He was even arrested briefly, and then he got the COVID-19 disease and actually died. But since then, the Chinese government rapidly switched its outlook from denial to very stringent containment. The entire city of Wuhan was put under quarantine, and they were.
I don't see how people like I talked to a lot of doctors, and especially at the initial before the World Health Organization determined a pandemic, and they're just kept all the same talking points, like the flu kills way more people, blah blah blah, and so but it's like, look, they just quarantined the biggest city they have. Okay, like we have never seen that in our entire life. We've never seen that in history, right? We're at the most advanced we've ever been, and we have never seen an entire city be quarantined like that, which is just so impressive at such a fast rate. So it's like, when you see that, don't you think that kind of like gets your eyebrows kind of going up, saying like, okay, this could go full blown pandemic pretty soon. This is something to seriously worry about. Like I just feel like there's just there and just people are just being so blind to that fact.
Well, there's a lot that we still don't know about this virus, and there is even more that was not known at that time. And I think a lot of people thought, well, the Wuhan quarantine was effective enough to largely contain this, and any other outbreaks would be more minor. The problem is now there are many hotspots for this disease. Italy, as I mentioned, is the biggest one. But in the United States, New York State is the hub now of the pandemic. There have been 150 out of the 467 deaths thus far in the U.S. are in New York State. So really, this is a disease that spreads very effectively in crowded urban centers, highly populated areas. If you're out in the countryside, or even in a place similar to where I live, Carson City, Nevada, has a lot of open space, has a lot of space that people could roam about and not really come into contact with that many people. I could go out on a run and run for several miles without encountering a single individual. and this is quite common. If I do encounter an individual, I could very easily move 12 feet apart from that individual and never come into close enough contact to transmit any pathogen or have any pathogen transmitted to me. So that's an easier type of environment for containing a disease. But when people are crowded together in these dense urban centers, it's much more difficult to avoid human contact. So with Wuhan, of course, Wuhan was one of the larger cities in China. It's comparable in size to some of the bigger American cities. And this is where the disease proliferated. But if you look at the same coronavirus dashboard, it also separates out the cases by province. Out of the 81,054 confirmed cases, 67,800 were in Hubei province, which includes Wuhan. So the vast majority. And out of the 3,261 deaths, 3,144 were in Hubei province, which includes Wuhan. The other numbers are a lot milder than what we have been seeing in other countries and even specific U.S. states. So this is very much a disease of urban conditions. And I think that also behooves people to consider their lifestyle choices. This isn't part of the USTP proposals. We're not telling people not to live in cities. But as an individual, think about, do you really want to be in these very crowded conditions? I know for our generation, the millennial generation, there has been a reversal of a trend that had occurred in the United States since the post-World War II period. In the post-World War II period, many families were moving out of the city centers and into the suburbs because there was more space there. There was cheaper land. People could actually buy standalone houses and have room to raise their families. And with the millennial generation, this trend has been reversing. I think it was a consequence of the fallout of the Great Recession, because many millennials gave up on this dream of home ownership. Many millennials decided, well, since I'm going to be a perpetual renter anyway, why don't I move to a place which is cool, like a big city center where there's a lot of culture, where there are a lot of other millennials, where
we're all like literally in the worst positions, because like not only are we all gathered together in places like LA and stuff, but we're on the ocean too, where it's like, okay, we're about to be wiped off with the climate crisis over the next decade or so. So it's like, come on, and that could help with, spreading out the country across the planet. We still have a pretty good amount of room to live on. I think culture takes up about 40% of land in the U.S. and then the U.S. or the world, I forget, one of those. And then and then 5%, like 3% is like the actual humans, like real estate and stuff. And like streets, so we actually have like so much room, and I'm sure there's a lot of more benefits to spreading out on American land.
There's plenty of land to expand upon. So Nevada has 80% of its land unoccupied and owned by the U.S. federal government. This is a good bridge into the federal land dividend that the U.S. Transhumanist Party proposes, and that the Ben Zion 2020 campaign is very much advancing right now. So the federal land dividend is a proposal to enable a lot of this federal land, with the exception of noted landmarks, national parks, and other territory that should receive special protection, to be leased by companies. And provided they follow certain environmentally friendly business practices, they would be able to extract revenue from that land, but they have to pay this rent to the federal government. And the cost of this rent would essentially be able to supply a universal basic income. If all of the available federal land is utilized in this way, people could get a basic income of $52,000 per year. So that would be a groundbreaking type of reform.
But you said $52,000 a year.
$52,000 per year. Yes.
Oh, dude, we're in business.
Ben Zion's federal land dividend is the most generous one. So Andrew Yang offered $1,000 per month, and then Rachel Haywire decided to just take Andrew Yang's federal land dividend when she ran in the USTP primary and double it. But she essentially just took it wholesale from Andrew Yang and doubled it. Ben Zion was saying, I'll take that and change $1,000 a month to $1,000 a week. But his way of financing it is through this federal land dividend. It was a concept originated by Zoltan Istvan in his 2016 presidential campaign, but Ben Zion actually did the calculations and showed that $52,000 a year would be possible if all of this land were utilized. But yes, there are other possible uses for this land too. Open it up for housing development. There is, as you said, plenty of land to expand, plenty of open space. I've driven through central Nevada on the way between Carson City and Las Vegas, and I can tell you there is so much open land. You could go for 100 miles without encountering any populated area. You will see signs advertising the nearest gas station 104 miles away, or something of that nature. So people who are saying we're running out of land, or we're running out of resources, or there's overpopulation and there's not enough space to put these people in, they don't know what the situation is with land in the vast majority of the United States. They may be living in these coastal cities, which are very densely populated, and they may think this is how the world is. No, these densely populated cities are an anomaly. And again, I question the prudence of living in a city center if you can afford not to. And actually, you can afford not to because it's quite expensive to live in a city center. But the economy, unfortunately, thus far has been very much premised on physical proximity to one's place of work in order to earn a living. One of the silver linings of this COVID-19 situation is that because so many people have been, in effect, compelled to work remotely, they are going to be realizing the advantages of that, and the fact that unless you are in an immediate service role, telecommuting actually can be more productive than going into an office setting, where there can be some of these horrible conditions, like the open floor plans, where there's no privacy, there's no room to focus, there's no room for in-depth concentration that's needed to get into a flow state to be really productive, to undertake large-scale efforts. So people
on that note, can I share a real quick story about just kind of how I've personally experienced this and figured this out? So I was working for a video conference startup in Redwood Shores in Silicon Valley from 2013 to 2015. So I have experience about video conferencing and the technology of it and how it's played out and how it's evolved over the last 7 or so years and before that. And so I'm also an investor, so I want to always talk about action items people can take if they do have capital and want to deploy it. I mean, you look at something like Zoom, a public stock that's a video conferencing platform that has been going up and probably will continue to as people do what you just stated, stay more at home, work from home, start to realize that, hey, like, why am I stressing, commuting into the office every day, wasting gas, contributing to climate change and putting miles on my car, when I can probably be, in some cases, like way more productive just doing video conferencing like we're doing right now. We're holding this interview, this conversation on Skype. And so I do think that that's a huge thing that people are going to realize. And my wife and I did sell our home in the San Francisco Bay Area a couple of years ago. I thought that we'd probably have a financial turn down a little bit sooner, but I've been waiting, and finally it looks like it's happening. You never know what's going to cause these financial turndowns, but in case people haven't been following what's been going on, like we're at near 0% interest rates, and Europe has been in negative interest rates for a long time now. And this is crazy. This is unprecedented. This has never happened in the history of the world. So I just wonder if maybe things will start happening, as you stated, where people living in these incredibly expensive apartments, real estate in San Francisco, New York, these big cities, all over the world, will start to think more about, hey, what's actually a healthier lifestyle? Maybe I want to move out more into the suburbs and into the nature, and maybe that will change. And just one other thing I want to say is regarding the population stuff, overpopulation, all that stuff. Technology is the most important thing. So this book, 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel, is phenomenal. You probably heard me talk about it if you've been watching these live streams or my YouTube channel. Peter Thiel's phenomenal. I've read this book 3 times, and one of the big things that he talks about in the book is that it's not about overpopulation or underpopulation or the carrying capacity of the planet in the sense that most people think about it. The most important thing is, can we develop technologies that don't exist, that we need to exist? And in a sense, we already have solar, but we don't have enough solar to run the whole planet. So if we have enough solar to run all the world's energy, then all of a sudden we're in a completely different world. But that's not just going to happen. We have to get to work. And for every single level of technology, we can literally have trillions of people living on this planet. But we need to do it. We need to develop a lot of technology to be able to do that, because it's not anybody's right to tell somebody living poorly in Africa or North Korea or anywhere that you can't have what the first world already has. They're going to want that. You can't stop them from wanting that. That's human nature, to want to improve your situation. So the only way to get ourselves out of this is to improve our technology. And the only way to live longer, dramatically, radically extend human life, is science and technology. And so I just want to make sure that people understand those things. And I also, Rowan, you're not sharing it now, I also at some point wanted to get back to the article that Gennady and I were chatting about. And I can have Gennady share his perspective on this, because this article is really, really good. And, I always preach, be careful who you follow on social media, be careful what information you put in your brain. I highly recommend you read this article. I put the link in the live stream here, so folks watching can check it out. We'll put a link in the description if you're watching later. But Gennady, share your thoughts on John Ioannidis. And before you do that, this guy is like super, super impressive if you look at his credentials, right? So he didn't just come out of a wormhole or something, and he's somebody who's very credible, particularly in epidemiology and data.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. One excerpt from this article that I find highly compelling is this. Yet if the health system does become overwhelmed, the majority of the extra deaths may not be due to coronavirus, but to other common diseases and conditions, such as heart attacks, strokes, trauma, bleeding, and the like, that are not adequately treated. So right there, he recognizes that there are severe costs to this kind of response, where right now, a lot of hospitals are canceling elective surgeries, or ostensibly elective surgeries. These are often needed to help overcome a serious, debilitating medical condition, or even save a patient's life. It's just you can choose to do it this month or next month. But nonetheless, there are so many other diseases that kill hundreds of thousands of people. And to say that everything needs to be locked down and these patients aren't going to get service because they want to avoid overwhelming the healthcare system is going to be tremendously harmful to many people, including older people who don't have the COVID-19 infection, but have other conditions that would otherwise have been treated. And then he continues to say, if the level of the epidemic does overwhelm the healthcare system and extreme measures have only modest effectiveness, then flattening the curve may make things worse. Instead of being overwhelmed during a short acute phase, the health system will remain overwhelmed for a more protracted period. That's another reason we need data about the exact level of the epidemic activity. And I touched on that before. This is why universal testing, at least the universal availability of test kits, is very helpful, because we can get a true rate of serious cases and mortality if we know what the denominator actually is. And then I want to point out this last brief paragraph of this article. It's just one sentence where Dr. Ioannidis writes, "If we decide to jump off the cliff, we need some data to inform us about the rationale of such an action and the chances of landing somewhere safe." And it does feel like our societies in the Western world have made the sudden decision to jump off the cliff and lock everything down, and essentially without regard for the consequences on individual humans and their well-being. And this is being done ostensibly to save lives, but there are very conscious decisions being made to ruin people's lives. And I believe those are unacceptable trade-offs to make. You should never be sacrificing deliberately any individual in order to, quote, save another individual.
Yeah, it's super important for everybody to develop the morals and our ethics, because it's really the only way forward for our species, and it's morally superior. Like, if we can convince these corrupt people who are burning fossil fuels at incredible rates and getting wealthy off of it, or being corrupt in the healthcare system, which is particularly evil, big pharma and etc. If we can convince these people to want to live forever, to extend the lifespan for thousands of years using science and technology, then are they going to be corrupt? Are they going to want to kill people so that they can make a couple hundred, extra couple $1,000, an extra $1 million, so that they can get people hooked on different drugs? I think they'll be less likely to do that. Because not only are they preventing themselves from living longer, because they're wasting their time on a drug that doesn't work, or whatever, or trying to mass produce animals, etc. And they're gonna have to live with all of us, right, for millions and billions of years. Like, do you think we're gonna just forget about all the horrible things they did and how they tried to, murder all of us just to create a quick buck? We're not going to forget that for a long time. So their only option now is to help us, and to stop being evil, and to start helping us defeat death once and for all. And I think the best reason why to convince people is death is actually not the scariest thing in our future. I believe a long distance brain computer interface, somebody hacking you, that person, if they're evil, that's something we can all be hacked. Even at the same time, from a satellite or something into our brains. This is technology that's likely already available, but like to governments and stuff, but maybe not. It's going to be available in like 15 years for sure. And so, like, you do not want to get hacked. It's very important that you don't get hacked by somebody who's evil, because they can increase like your sensation, like your proprioception and stuff, or not proprioception, your nociceptors, right? You can stimulate your amygdala more. So that you feel pain like 1,000 more times worse. And they can keep this hidden, right? You can maintain somebody's muscle movements, right? And this is a reality that's going to occur relatively soon. And so I think that's the most important thing. Like we really have to make sure, we should extend lifespan. Like, that's really what I'm focusing on mainly. But I think we really need to figure out a way to not get hacked. And yeah, I just want to do a quick little left turn there.
So I would like to address some of the other questions while we are in this live stream. First, Gilgamesh Report asks, is COVID-19 a threat to transhumanism as a movement and to longevity escape velocity? So I will respond in the following way. This situation is both a threat and an opportunity depending on how it turns out and what we do with it. So if this does become a wake-up call to the world to treat public health more seriously, and to invest more resources into it and massively ramp up our response capability, then this could be our movement's moment to shine, as Brent pointed out. And we, however, need to capitalize on this and essentially go into a full-fledged war footing in order to make this happen. And this is where the 17 proposals that the U.S. Transhumanist Party has put forward thus far come in, because we need to take control of this narrative, and instead of this futile strategy of locking everything down and retreating, we need to convince the general public and governments to go on the offensive against this pandemic, against future pandemics, against aging, and against death itself. So this is our opportunity to turn things around if we mobilize as a movement and if we mobilize the rest of the society. Now, I do see threats here. I do see very serious threats arising from societal disintegration, because if society disintegrates, then the higher order functions, the infrastructure needed to support medical research or other economic activity that would facilitate cutting-edge technological progress, would also collapse. So if people are universally struggling with how to get food, how to protect themselves against armed gangs because the police don't want to enforce order, that would be a very troubling situation. And we need to do everything we possibly can to prevent societal collapse, to prevent major economic collapse to the extent that is possible, and to help mitigate that damage, because the consequences are devastating. A common saying is essentially civilization is 9 meals away from total collapse. If people haven't eaten for 3 days, all of a sudden they become willing to do things that would be unthinkable in ordinary times. So with all of these lockdowns, our societies are being brought precipitously close to that edge. And to be honest, I believe we have about 6 months of continuation on the present trajectory before there is complete social breakdown, because people are not going to be able to tolerate these restrictive measures for that much longer. Already there is widespread grumbling and defiance. People crowding the beaches in Florida. That's a benign example of that. But think about if they haven't just been subject to these restrictions for a few days, and they're doing this as an act of rebellion, an act of showing that they can still live their lives. Imagine if people have been subject to these kinds of quarantines and restrictions for months, how they're going to react, especially if they start running out of food, they start running out of essential supplies. Already people have been stockpiling firearms. And
things can get bad like really quickly, and they can get bad actually overnight. And a lot of people, don't want to take that serious. That fact, they think it's conspiracy theory, but that's not the case at all. Don't get too comfortable with what's going on right now. A pandemic could really disrupt our society in a way where, we go full Walking Dead around here, and
right.
And that can really happen. Like that can happen overnight. Like let's just say China, continues to blame the U.S. right, and they throw over a few nukes or something. They throw over a power outage, a surge or another bioweapon, or something more horrific. Whatever. There's I can list like 1,000 things. Okay. And then Russia capitalizes on that, and China and Russia have been talking to each other a lot. I saw them drinking some vodka with each other a while ago. The president of China and Putin. So things can just happen overnight like that. It's been pending for a long time, and now we're all comfortable. But hopefully this wakes people up to where we need to be serious.
Now
I just want to, Gennady, yes. Can I say one thing real quick, and then I want Max to chime in. We haven't heard from Max in a bit. Rowan, this is your channel. Would love for you to maybe get back to the interview format and ask Gennady. But I just have one simple thing that I want the audience, to keep in mind. the government's first and foremost job, the most simple and basic thing that they should be doing, is protecting their citizens. This is why armies have been created since the beginning of civilization. However, one thing that a lot of people don't realize is that, Steven Pinker has probably been the most prevalent, prestigious person to point this out, is that the world is getting better. It's getting much, much better and safer, and there's not as many, wars per capita before. So we need to look at what we always talk about on this channel and in our transhumanist party, is that the number one threat to your life now is aging. It's 110,000 deaths every single day. So this is the common enemy that the global government should be getting behind, not just global government, at a local level, state, country, and then also global. This is what we should be getting behind to fight. And so I want to hopefully take this pandemic as a unification opportunity for all of us to get behind and fight this in new, creative ways, because, we're not safe, and we could be a lot safer. We're way safer than we ever have been before. Like, the reason why people are dying of aging is because we are living longer, generally speaking, than all of history. Yes, it's trailed off in recent years and has to do with certain poverty issues and certain things like that. But in general, we're living way longer than we ever have before. So now it's time to take it to the next level and fight what's actually killing us. So that's what I wanted to say. And, Gennady, you reply, or Max, I'd love for you to chime in.
I'm gonna real quick. I was gonna add in
as viewers.
Wait, hold on one second, real quick.
Yeah.
I was gonna add in Steel Hawes, real quick. Is that cool?
Well, I think we should be drawing this live stream to a close soon,
Okay.
because I generally think after this is concluded, if it's much longer than 2 hours, it might minimize the views that we get. But already we've had one of the viewers say that he or she says, "Afraid I've got to head out now. May you live forever." And yes, you also may you live forever. I hope we all get to. But I do want to.
Yeah, we
get
should do closing thoughts soon.
Some of the questions that were posed. So I think this is related to the subject of whether COVID-19 is a threat or an opportunity or both for the transhumanist movement. Jama Warsame asks, when do you think death will be defeated? Maybe 2085, and YouTube account 159 posits that maybe 2050. It is not a guaranteed time frame. It's contingent on a lot of aspects we don't know. Even Aubrey de Grey only speaks in probabilities. He says a 50% probability of reaching longevity escape velocity in 17 years with adequate funding. So it depends on how much funding is contributed. It depends on what the scientists discover. We can't always anticipate what future discoveries would bring. If we had complete foreknowledge of what an effective treatment to reverse aging would be, we would have that treatment right now. We would have the ability to engineer it. So there are some unknown unknowns that make a precise estimation impossible. But what is important is that we have a fighting chance within our own lifetimes to achieve viable age reversal before we ourselves become extremely senesced. And as long as there is a non-negligible probability of that, I believe we need to try. And I believe that societies need to make this a priority and devote as many available resources to this fight as possible. Because really, this is all we have. In my view, this is the only life we've got. And whether or not you think there's an afterlife, this is the only life we're certain, absolutely certain, that we have with empirical evidence directly before us. So we need to do the best we can to perpetuate it. Now, if we reach longevity escape velocity, that doesn't mean all death will disappear. People will not become invulnerable just because they can reverse their aging. They would still be vulnerable to accidents. They would still be vulnerable to dying in war or dying because of murder or because an asteroid hits the Earth. So the focus will then be also on minimizing those other risks, reducing the hazards involved in all areas of life. That is what progress is about. And Steven Pinker's narrative about the decline of violence shows this has already been happening throughout history. But the longer people live, the more prosperous their lives are, the more they have to lose from a random act of violence or an accident. So they will be even more conscientious, even more careful to prevent that.
Definitely.
Yes.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Gennady, what can all the viewers do? What can we tell the viewers to how can they help this progress, and what can they do personally to move the movement so everybody can get involved and we can increase the, ideally we want to, like you said, have a president that's a transhumanist in the party. What can viewers like us do right now to increase the cause? What can we do on a daily basis to help?
And before Gennady answers, you can actually DM me. Gennady will likely be at the Zoom meeting that I'm holding next weekend. And I'm going to have like 30 people, I think. It's my first one I'm doing. And ideally, I want like 100 people. I'm gonna give everyone like jobs and stuff. And Gennady, I'm sure, will help me out with that. So that's one thing you can do. DM me for more details, by the way.
Yeah. And go to transhumanist-party.org/membership. Sign up for free. It takes less than a minute. We have over 2,200 members right now. We're getting new members every day, but I believe we need to have at least 10,000 members in order for this organization to be self-sustaining, for the subsequent growth to kind of take on a momentum of its own. Right now, we still need to keep pushing the boulder uphill, but eventually we're going to reach a plateau, and eventually we're going to reach a point where that boulder rolls down the other side to the great valley of indefinite life extension. And that is the world that I want to achieve. This pandemic has really brought matters into sharp focus, and for me, this is a war that will not end until we have won this victory over death. This war is going to continue even past the arrival of longevity escape velocity, into mitigating these other risks, into making sure that we live in a safe enough world where if we go outside, we're not going to get killed at random, where we have a very good probability of living for thousands or tens of thousands or eventually million years. And then we can begin addressing the big existential risks to planet Earth. The fact that we are a one-planet species and we really need to colonize other worlds in the event of asteroid impacts or solar flares, or even over time, the destruction of the Earth itself, because it's only projected to last another 5 billion years. Now, I believe we have plenty of time. We have plenty of time to avert those calamities or to discover alternative habitations, but we need to have this long-term orientation. We need to see this as a project of continuous improvement, continuous expansion of our capability, and a recognition that the enemy that is death is going to remain our enemy. We're not going to be able to stop fighting it. We're just going to be gaining more and more ground until death becomes a relatively minor presence in our lives rather than the ubiquitous presence.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, and Gennady, to the people that think right now, I'm sure there's people that think that this is not something that's feasible in my lifetime. What do you say to those people? I know we talked to Jose Cordero recently, and he said that he feels we're 20 to 30 years away from this happening. So curious to see how long do you think we're away into getting this achievable? And this is in their lifetime.
I think longevity escape velocity could be achieved within 20 or 30 years if society makes it a priority. What people can do is advocate for making it a priority. So spread the ideas of the U.S. Transhumanist Party, of other organizations that are advocating longevity. Write about it. Create media about it. Create art. Create music. Create video discussions like this one. Advocate for policies such as those that are found on the U.S. Transhumanist Party website. See how they can be implemented by governments at various levels. Participate in the political process. Testify before legislative bodies. Write letters to the editor. Do interviews with media outlets. Make sure you educate yourself on the science. Make sure that you are aware of both the common arguments that might be put forth in opposition and how to respond to those arguments, because all of those critical arguments, they have very obvious and effective responses, but it is worthwhile to brush up on those.
Dr. Jose Cordero has really good evidence for the 20 to 30 year prediction also, which Gennady is well versed on and this law of accelerating returns, the computer growth, its exponential growth, it's a damn near law. I mean, that thing is like surviving like world wars and pandemics and like just not even being touched by it. And for obvious reasons, computers can only help until they become conscious and maybe want to turn on us. Which, I mean, they're going to become super intelligent, so we probably don't even have to worry about that. AI is likely our only way out from our demise, from the climate crisis and pandemics and stuff, and our own stupidity. Increasing, making super intelligence or even genetically engineering intelligence is quintessential, likely quintessential to our survival, to our species. So yeah, definitely check out that graph, computer growth.
We have another question for Gennady. Jama Warsame says, what things do you take to extend life?
So right now, there haven't yet been age reversal treatments developed. And I think this is very important. Right now, the best we can do is slow down the rate of deterioration through healthy lifestyle, essentially. So if you exercise, if you eat a healthy diet, if you avoid stress, if you get enough sleep, if you avoid careless risks, if you don't do recreational drugs, if you don't drink alcohol, you're going to be healthier for a longer period of time. You might give yourself about 10 more years on average beyond what you would have otherwise gotten. The number one cause of shortened life expectancy right now in the developed world is tobacco smoke, actually. So if you're a tobacco smoker, quitting smoking now is the best decision you can make for increasing your life expectancy. And after about 15 years after you quit smoking, if you haven't given yourself cancer already, your lung tissue will heal and you will have the opportunity to be about as healthy as somebody who never smoked. But that 15-year period has to elapse, and that's assuming you haven't done a lot of damage to yourself already. So these basic health habits, these common sense precautions against risk are very important right now, because it does make a difference whether you make it to 70 or 80 or 90. The longer you're able to live through these conventional means, the greater your probability of surviving to longevity, escape velocity, to the widespread availability of age reversal treatments.
Or at the very least, if you're not going to quit, at least take some supplement that might mitigate a lot of that damage. Like I imagine some very powerful antioxidant could help prevent some of the damage at least. It's still going to damage you, but, quit, that's the number thing.
You guys ready to do final thoughts?
There's another question. Let's just quickly go through these questions.
Okay.
YouTuber account 159 says, do you guys think cold shower can slow down aging? I do.
Very, very possibly. If you look into Wim Hof, this is one of the things that at first I saw Gennady kind of maybe nodding his head. Look into Wim Hof. Certain things sound crazy at first, but he doesn't necessarily look young, but the things that he has accomplished, scientifically validated, is like basically just unbelievable. You scientifically credible and scientifically minded people won't believe it until they look into it. So I'd say look into Wim Hof. He's the most credible person when it comes to the power of the cold on the human body. And so I do cold showers, and I have definitely benefited from them. Basically, real briefly, you want to put the cold mainly on your neck and your chest area, and you want to do it, pretty briefly. I do it in the shower. And then mentally also, there are biophysical benefits, but also mentally. I just feel like, man, I just woke up, took a cold shower. I just did something tough. Everything else seems like easy. I'm playing with house money from here on. So, Gennady, since the question was probably directed towards you, please share your thoughts.
So it's actually a very old Russian folk remedy to dump a bucket of ice water on yourself. But I'm not sympathetic to folk remedies myself, because my thought is, if it were that easy, then at least some people would have dramatically reversed their aging already, and we would.
Gennady, sorry, let me clarify. We are not going to be living thousands of years from like cold water therapy. That's hopefully not what I was implying or saying. Are there, health benefits and psychological benefits? And, look into Wim Hof. I'd say, like, definitely there are.
This is a good thing to mention. Someone in the chat, Gilgamesh Report, says cold showers activate SIRT3, for example. That's a sirtuin gene, I think. So, for example, that's right there. There might be a study or something that can confirm that.
I think there just needs to be some basic life extension papers that need to be studied on it. I mean, it's an easy thing to test, right? Just make some mice really cold, and there's some interesting things you can do with that. I'm sure temperature regulation, that makes sense, that it would cause some sort of health benefit. Just think of like the diving reflex, for example. I mean, that's a pretty dramatic scenario. But, you want to prevent proteins from being denatured and your DNA from being annealed or whatever, being unannealed, I think. And, yeah, I'm sure the cold can do something. And, hopefully we can all have our own little, what are those things that Joe Rogan always talks about? How he goes in like a little cold chamber. It's like a little, I don't know.
It's called a hyperbaric chamber or a flotation tank. He goes in there and floats. I've done it a few times. It's pretty cool. It's really awesome to go in there and meditate, because it's also called an isolation tank. It was created in the 1950s by a guy named John Scully, I think is his name. And basically what you go in there, it's completely dark because it closes, so there's no light. And then you're floating. And I highly recommend, if you're in Israel, go to the Dead Sea, because it's kind of like that natural flotation tank, because there's 70% Epsom salt or 70% salt in the Dead Sea, so you just naturally float. It's really good for mineralizing your skin and stuff, but the water goes like just kind of right over your ears naturally, so you can't really hear much, So with no sound and basically no light, after maybe a half hour or so, everybody's different. Your senses just start to change. And so if you're meditating, then you just kind of everybody has a unique experience, but I find it very pleasant. So I recommend it, and I first heard of it from Joe Rogan maybe 10 years ago or so.
I want to try one of those so bad.
Careful about that, though, because Aaron Trawick, who was the CEO of Ascendance Biomedical, actually died in one of those flotation tanks at the age of 28. He essentially lost consciousness. Yes, if you are isolated from the rest of the world, if you have no sensory stimuli, you're floating in a bunch of water, how easy it is to just fall asleep.
Wow.
It's common for me, if I'm sitting in a comfortable chair or on a couch, that I start to drift off. And that's fine if I don't particularly need to focus on something. But if I'm immersed in water, and the consequence of that is my head sinks into the water, you can see what can happen.
That is
Yeah,
scary.
you need to make sure you're doing it right first of all. So you want to lay in the middle. They explain it to you if you go and do this at a business. Joe Rogan has one in his house. So yeah, definitely take the necessary precautions. But
Yeah, they should have like a safety net thing, like or something. Like that.
I would just
crazy.
say for me, like if you actually do it properly and if you know your body, like I don't twitch or anything or do anything crazy, and I've never fallen asleep in it personally. Even if I did fall asleep, I wouldn't be personally worried about dying. But everybody, make your own decisions. Listen to Gennady. Like definitely.
Rowan is never gonna get in one of those now, dude. That guy
No, I
is.
will. No, trust me, I will.
Rowan doesn't fly in airplanes.
I'm gonna have little like something to prop my body up, so that even if I were to fall asleep, I wouldn't drown. I think there's a way to get around that.
Guys,
So,
just we're not going to thousands of years from flotation devices or Wim Hof method cold showers. We're talking
Wear
about
like a snorkel.
people
This
can do
is
right now to maybe have benefits. So that's very different. Like we need telomerase gene therapy, or maybe CRISPR, or maybe something that we haven't even thought of or don't know of yet to live hundreds or thousands of years. That's why we got to get to work and do the research.
All right,
Absolutely.
next question.
You guys ready for closing thoughts?
No, next question.
One more question.
Longevity Girl says, it's scary because we can't control it. We are all afraid for our elderly loved ones. But it's not really a question, it was just a comment.
Right. And I'll acknowledge there's a sense of helplessness among many people. And this is the problem, that we can't as individuals just wish this pandemic away. We can't even pay large amounts of money as individuals in order to get this to disappear. This requires a kind of coordinated response that we haven't seen before, but it is an opportunity for humanity to unite. And hopefully, Bobby, there won't be a war between the United States and China, because people on all sides will at least recognize that that is the most futile, counterproductive action that can be taken.
Why can't they just kill themselves, dude? Like, why can't the people who want to go to war, like China and Russia and all of them, it's like, dude, just get in a ring and kill yourselves. Like, why do you have to include us? Okay,
so I suppose that the leaders of countries should fight it out in personal combat instead of involving the general population. So think about a boxing match between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin.
Dude, we literally may meme World War III out of existence, dude. We could literally, and Trump is somebody who could do it. We could just meme everyone out of existence, dude. Be like, dude, you want to fight? Get in the ring, vlog it. Okay, we're gonna YouTube it. We're gonna sponsor it. It's gonna be great. It'll be fun.
All right, next question. Gilgamesh Report says, is COVID-19 a threat to transhumanism as a movement and to the longevity escape velocity? Thank you.
I actually addressed that previously, so we can move.
All right, the next one is, this could be very useful to all of us if this is true. They say, do you have any thoughts on cinchona bark? This is S. And they say, someone I know was talking about it recently, saying that the quinine in the bark helps our bodies neutralize cells hijacked by viruses. I had not heard of that, but that sounds awesome if that's true. That's something to look into. It's something to have in our arsenal to protect against the virus.
I have not heard of that either, but I will research it. That's all I can say.
Yes. And then lastly, I have a question for you, Gennady, and that would be, if they come out with a virus, if they come out with a vaccine for the coronavirus, are you going to take it? Or do you have any hesitations, any fears about taking that virus? And will you take it or not? I'm personally afraid of it.
Right. I never want to be in the first cohort of those receiving a medical treatment because there are possible side effects. Now, there are many volunteers who are lining up right now to participate in whatever trials they have, and they're actually getting paid $100 per visit, which is good. They should be compensated for their time and their willingness to participate. But for me, because I'm in a relatively low-risk demographic for COVID-19, I am not that fearful of even contracting it myself. I don't believe it's going to kill me or cause any serious complications, as Brent pointed out. Now, in the future, if the vaccine is shown to be safe and there is a very high degree of certainty that I wouldn't experience adverse side effects from taking it, then I might as well take it. It could become an annual procedure. Along with getting your flu vaccine, you get your COVID vaccine, and that would be fine. But I wouldn't want to be in the first cohort, as with any medical treatment, unless I were in such a high-risk demographic that the risks of not getting that treatment would outweigh the risks of any side effects. Speaking of which, Rowan, you know I'm a very risk-averse individual, but I have long thought that you were a bit more risk-averse than I am even. But on this matter of the flotation tanks, I think perhaps for one of a minority of situations, I am more risk-averse than you, in that you would go into one of those and I would not.
Yes, that is very true.
I recommend going to the Dead Sea in Israel. I've been there twice. I was just there again in, I think, October 2018. It's absolutely phenomenal. It's a great experience just to float. And then also the actual soil there is great. You put it on your skin, and I'm telling you, your skin has never felt so soft in the days.
Dude, I will never go to a sea that has the name dead in it, first off. Second off, I was going to say something, but I totally forget what I was going to say. And third off, I still don't remember. So yeah, go ahead and keep talking.
It's not biologically dead, you know, Bobby. The water and the salt are not animate. So
the psychological effect, man, it's too much.
What about Death Valley? I ran through Death Valley. I ran 24 miles one year, and I ran a marathon there the next year. And I went there essentially to conquer Death Valley, to overcome the challenges of Death Valley, to not die in it.
Nice. That's cool. Yeah.
I think it's pretty risky, possibly, to run super marathons because it might be too much
it's unhealthy.
exercise.
Oh, right? No. It's quite possible to do it safely. Just talk to Dr. Bill Andrews. He has given me a lot of extremely useful advice. The key is you need to keep yourself well hydrated. You need to have good nutrition throughout the run. You need to take in energy. As you recall, I was doing during my marathon on the track at the Carson City Multipurpose Athletic Center. And the one thing I wasn't doing enough of during this marathon, which people should be doing, is having adequate intake of electrolytes like calcium, sodium, magnesium, potassium, those types of substances, which are very important. So if you do all of these recommended practices, if you have adequate hydration, if you have adequate nutrition, if you have adequate intake of electrolytes, and you don't take crazy risks, you protect yourself against the heat, you protect yourself against ultraviolet exposure, you cover your skin, you wear sunscreen, then it can be a very safe and enjoyable activity. I've known people who have run for 100 miles or even 200 miles at a time. Now, I haven't done anything like that. My longest outdoor race was 33 miles, and I've run several 50-kilometer races, which are essentially 31.1 miles, which have been quite enjoyable. They're challenging, but they can be a part of your training regimen. Don't do them every day, but a few of them per year would be fine. Now, this may be a situation in which you are more risk averse than I am, Rowan, but it's a question of control. Can you control your circumstances? Can you be prepared for your body to handle this level of challenge?
Yeah. We asked, we interviewed Bill Falloon like a week ago, I think, or something, and we asked him about his death anxiety and, you know, his how much he reduces risk. And like, he's so funny. He's like, there's literally no synonym to describe my death anxiety. He's like, it's off the charts.
He says the only time he flies is to go to Radfest. I didn't know that about him. And he actually I think he'd be okay with me sharing this. He just told me personally, like towards the end of RadFest, that he has a wealthy individual that flew him home on a private jet. So he didn't even want to fly like commercially just because he's, I think, worried about statistically. So I thought that was funny.
Commercial airliners are a lot safer than private jets.
I
would never fly in a private jet, but I do fly. I used to fly in commercial airliners. No more after this pandemic, though.
I agree. We love you, Bill Falloon. So maybe you should just be flying commercially if you're going to fly at all. Listen to Gennady. I agree.
Hey, Gennady, before we go, can you tell me the name of that guy that died in the flotation tank device? I'm definitely going to look that up because I never heard that this is dangerous before.
Aaron Trawick, Traywywick.
Was he an immortalist?
Yes. He was a bio. I met him in person at RadFest. I had a nice conversation with him. He was quite ambitious.
Yeah, did you hear about that guy who got shot by police in his sleep?
Yes, Duncan Lemp.
You know him?
Did. Well, he was a Facebook friend of mine fairly recently.
I talked to him over the phone. He was doing research for me. He's going to try to find mimetics for me, teach neural nets how to find life extension mimetics. And so I sent him over some of my preliminary research, and then he wasn't messaging back. And then I read how he got murdered in his sleep. I was just like, whoa, dude.
It's a tragedy and a travesty. Police violence in the United States is completely unhinged and out of control. It's because of the terrible training that police receive, which essentially instructs them to view everyone as a potential threat and shoot first, ask questions later. I think this is horrific, and the
kill.
Yes, the SWAT team members who assassinated Duncan Lemp in his sleep need to be brought to justice. The U.S. Transhumanist Party on its website has a post about this, and we've declared a week of mourning for Duncan Lemp. This is most unfortunate, and thank you for bringing this up. He was a good person. He did not deserve to have this happen. He did not.
The article, I think in the Washington Post I read about it, they said that they found out he's a part of the 3%ers. Does that ring a bell?
Yes, but the 3%ers, they're not an illegal organization. I see pickup trucks in Nevada. I see pickup trucks in northern Nevada with the 3%er logo on them all the time. They're just a movement. They're a bit of a movement that's skeptical of the U.S. federal government. I don't support them. I don't endorse them. But they're not. It's not illegal to be one of them. And to have the SWAT team.
Yeah, but are they? Do you think they're doing anything pretty sketchy that's getting them eyeballs?
I doubt that Duncan Lemp was involved in any insurrectionary.
Yeah, he seems so nice when I talk to him.
Right. No. I think this was just extrajudicial murder. There's no other way to frame it. And as life extension advocates, we should be concerned about police violence because it can be indiscriminate. It can affect anybody, irrespective of skin color, national origin, wealth, income, age, because of these default police protocols, which are quite horrifying.
What are options for the terminally ill and the elderly for life extension? What do you say to them? What can they do personally if they know that they don't have 30 to 40 years or 20 years to live? We're talking about all these different treatment plans for to extend your life for when this technology will be available. But what do they do? What options do they have?
Well, two options. First of all, try to hang on for as long as possible because every year you live, there are additional advances. Take part in clinical trials. If you see some sort of trial that could aid you in at least treating, if not reversing, your condition, any option is better than none. But also there's the option of cryonics. Yes, cryopreservation.
Alcor, by the way.
Hey, one question we have to get in before we let Gennady go is we have to get, Gennady, your thoughts on what you're personally doing to combat your own aging. And then also what you think, folks with maybe unlimited resources, should be doing. So in other words, what do you think is the absolute best things that are available right now that you can be doing to slow, stop, and reverse human biological aging?
Well, in terms of the absolute best things to do right now, I would echo Aubrey de Grey, advocate for more funding for research, because that's the best way to maximize the speed of arrival for effective treatments. But what I do right now, because I'm young enough that I am not rapidly senescing yet, and for me, the key is to make sure that all of the practices that I engage in have more beneficial consequences than risks. I try to follow a basic healthy lifestyle. I exercise a lot. I run between 30 and 60 miles per week. I don't drink alcohol. I don't smoke tobacco. I don't take any recreational substances at all. And I avoid activities which have a high probability of physical injury or death. So those are primary practices. Now, I take vitamin D3. I have sometimes taken other vitamin supplements in the past, depending on my situation and depending on what I thought I needed at the time. But I would consider that to be more basic maintenance, staying in good health, preventing damage to the organism right now, not doing things that are dangerous, not doing things that could have deleterious side effects. If I were 50, I may be in a different position. And hopefully by the time that I'm 50, there will be proven treatments that reverse the rate of biological aging, or at least slow it down so appreciably that it could be phenotypically noticed. So a 50-year-old could look like a 40-year-old, for instance.
Did you ever look into the other vitamin I said you should take with vitamin D, like vitamin K2, because they're in conjunction, they work together, so it's important to get them both? Did you ever look into that?
Yes, I haven't done that yet at this time. We spoke in December, and it has been a turbulent few months. To be honest, because of COVID-19, right now I've been focusing on preparing my home for the basics. So I literally spent about $500 on food because I now have a 2-month supply of food and various
Did you
other...
get your toilet paper before it all sold out at Costco? I didn't. Luckily, I keep enough toilet paper.
Actually, it so happens that I pretty much always had a 2-month supply of it. So I did not buy. But
I'm kind of in the same boat, so we're doing okay. We got about 28 rolls left over. I went to Costco on Monday on my birthday, March 16th. Spent hours shopping at Costco. They were out of toilet paper, out of paper towels. So it's a strange world that we're living in right now. Hey, maybe if all these fiat currencies hyperinflate, toilet paper will become the new currency. What about that, huh?
Then I'm rich. I just did an inventory yesterday. I have 61 rolls, and I did not panic buy any of them. This was actually a fairly low point in my supply. I relaxed in my purchasing habits sometime around January, and I thought, I have enough for the immediate future. I can always buy more. Little did I know.
Just normal Gennady Stolярov behavior to have 61 toilet papers in the house. I love it.
Hey,
I love it.
I have to get going. Can I say goodbye?
Yes.
Yes, indeed. Well, I think we should now go to closing remarks. And
let me do mine first because I have to get going.
Bobby, that was my closing remark. I'm going to leave on toilet paper. I'll stick around, but that was it for me. Gennady,
nice.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time today. It's been a lot of fun, and we've learned a lot.
And
Johnny's the best. Make sure everybody subscribes, and we're very passionate about defeating death. Make sure you team up with us. We're pretty easy to get in contact with. Just make sure you don't waste our time. Our time is extremely valuable, and so is yours. And so we need to be efficient with our time. If you have something you can build, call us. If you don't, then call us and we'll give you something to do. And so, just be prepared for helping us out, for us helping you. And we look forward to living with you forever.
And my closing remark is get a bidet so that way you don't have to worry about toilet paper. So the water squirts at your butt and cleans your butt. It's like infinite toilet paper, and it will eventually pay for itself. It'll save you so much money. And secondly, I looked up this biohacker who died in the flotation tank, and huge development. There was actually ketamine in his system, and that is a hallucinogenic drug. So the flotation tanks might not be as dangerous as we think. It's his obviously that he took ketamine while going into the flotation tank to get some psychedelic trip that probably made it so he drowned.
Yes.
I can just say, for me personally, I do not believe they're dangerous. I've done them many times, but everybody do their own research. Everybody be careful. It's your life, but yeah, that doesn't surprise me. That, and don't do any type of mind altering drugs and go into a flotation device. Come on, guys. Just be smart.
Right. Yes. I definitely don't do any mind-altering drugs, period, because I always want to have control over my mind. And if I want new experiences, I'll go out and go for a run and observe new terrain, or play a computer game. You can immerse yourself in a different world. But the key is you're always fully conscious of what you're doing. You are always in control. You are always at the helm of your mind. That is always very important to me. So for my closing remarks, I want to say thank you to all of you, Bobby, Brent, Rowan, Max, for speaking with me today. It was a great conversation. Thank you to those in the chat who were asking questions and making comments. It is now more important than ever for us to maintain open and frequent channels of communication because of this physical, at least partial isolation and social distancing. The virtual realm has grown tremendously in significance. But this is in part a salutary development because more people are using these technologies of communication. Now everybody is starting to use Zoom and Skype and Google Hangouts, and to become more interested in people like us who have been doing this for a long time. Because ultimately these virtual platforms enable people to get together who would have been separated by thousands of miles otherwise, whose minds might never have connected before. And this is our opportunity to form these connections no matter where we live. And as a movement, this is essential because transhumanists are spread out throughout the country and throughout the world. And this is our means to remain an effective movement. We haven't had as many disruptions to our activities in the U.S. Transhumanist Party. If anything, we have ramped them up in the wake of this crisis. So I think it's important for people to recognize the advantages that these technologies bring and to take part in our virtual activities. Go to transhumanist-party.org, look at our COVID-19 response proposals, join us for free so that you can vote on those proposals starting on March 25th, and make sure you keep contributing to the movement. I know from personal experience, one person can make a tremendous difference. Everyone on this discussion panel has made a tremendous difference to the movement already. You can be like the people you heard today.
Thank you so much for being with us and allowing us to interview you. And I look forward to interviewing you again one day and talking. And may you live forever. And
yes, indeed.
And everyone, go subscribe to our new Max Life Extension YouTube channel. It's going to be awesome. We're going to have a lot of great interviews coming up in the future.
And I just want to say, Gennady, thank you so much for your time. Definitely subscribe to our channel. Subscribe to Gennady's YouTube channel. Make sure you hit the notification bell and then select all notifications. That really matters for the YouTube channel, for the algorithms. It's very, very simple. And then just, subscribe and follow and like all of our stuff on social media, super easy stuff you can do from your smartphone or sitting at home, whatever, and it does have an impact. And share on social media helps as well too. So we'll have links in the description below for all of Gennady and USTP's links for social media and their website and all that fun stuff. So please go there and take quick action items to have a big impact. Thank you so much.
Yes,
Thank
indeed.
you.
Thank you all. May you live forever, and good night.
Good night.